When a timid single mother accepts a stranger's offer to pose as his date at her sister's wedding, she thinks she's just escaping one humiliating night. She has no idea the mysterious man shielding her from her ex-husband's cruelty is Chicago's most dangerous crime boss, or that by morning she'll have a target on her back that will force her to choose between the small, safe life she knows and a love powerful enough to burn down everything standing in its way. If this story grabs you, stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far Clara's journey travels. The Chicago Four Seasons ballroom glittered like something out of a magazine Clara Bennett would never buy for herself. Crystal chandeliers threw fractured light across tables draped in champagne silk, each centerpiece a small fortune of white peonies and trailing orchids. Somewhere a string quartet played something elegant and forgettable, the kind of music that existed only to fill expensive silence. Clara sat at table 12, as far from the head table as geography and her family's quiet cruelty would allow, and tried to make herself smaller. It shouldn't have been possible. She was already pressed into the corner of her chair, her pale blue dress, the nicest thing she owned, bought on sale 3 years ago, making her look washed out next to the jewel tones and designer labels surrounding her. Her dark hair, swept into a simple twist, had already started to slip. She'd spent 20 minutes that morning on makeup she rarely wore, but under these lights, she still looked tired. She was tired. Working double shifts at Chicago General's pediatric unit while raising a 4-year-old alone had a way of settling into your bones. "Clara, you came!" The voice sliced through her attempt at invisibility. Clara looked up to find her sister Vanessa gliding toward her table, trailing her maid of honor and 2 bridesmaids like swans followed by slightly lesser swans. Vanessa looked perfect because Vanessa always looked perfect. Blonde, where Clara was brunette, confident, where Clara was careful, beloved where Clara was tolerated. "Of course I came," Clara said quietly. "You're my sister. I honestly wasn't sure. You've been so busy." Vanessa's smile didn't move past her lips. Behind her, Melissa Chen, Vanessa's best friend since college, examined her manicure with pointed disinterest. "I see you're sitting alone. Where's your +1? "I didn't bring one." "Right, of course not." Vanessa's hand drifted to her own ring, 3 carats, flawless, in a gesture Clara recognized as unconscious cruelty. "Well, the ceremony's starting soon. Try to look happy in the photos, This day is important to me." Clara nodded, her throat tight, and watched her sister sweep away toward the head table where their parents sat with the groom's family. Her mother caught Clara's eye for half a second before looking away. The message was clear. Don't embarrass us. Sit quietly. Be grateful you were invited at all. She'd been hearing that message her whole life. The ceremony was beautiful. Clara cried during the vows, but she cried at most weddings. Something about the hope of it always cracked her open. Vanessa looked radiant. Her new husband James looked appropriately besotted. Their parents beamed. Clara sat in the back row and felt the familiar weight of being the family disappointment settle deeper into her shoulders. The real torture started at the reception. Clara found her place card at table 12 and recognized the arrangement immediately. The overflow table, the collection of distant cousins and +1s nobody knew quite what to do with. She was the only family member seated there. Everyone else had been carefully distributed among the inner circles. She'd just sat down when she heard the laugh. Her whole body went cold. "Clara, Jesus Christ, is that you?" Ryan Cole crossed the ballroom with the easy confidence of a man who'd never been told no, his expensive suit fitting him like money fit the wealthy, naturally. He looked good. He always looked good. That was part of the problem. Had been part of the problem for the 3 years they were married and the 2 years since they'd divorced. "Ryan." Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. "What are you doing here?" "James is my cousin. Didn't Vanessa tell you?" His smile was sharp. "I'm at table 3, right up front." Of course he was. How's Emma?" He said their daughter's name like he was trying to remember a stranger's. He'd seen her exactly 4 times in 2 years, each visit shorter than the last. "She's good. She's with my neighbor tonight." Still can't afford a real babysitter, huh? He shook his head, the gesture dripping with manufactured sympathy. "You know, if you'd been reasonable during the divorce, You might not be struggling so much. Reasonable. That was Ryan's word for Clara accepting his lawyer's first offer. Minimal child support, no alimony, full custody because he didn't want it anyway. She'd been too tired and heartbroken to fight. I'm not struggling, Clara said quietly. It was a lie. She was always struggling. Sure you're not. His eyes drifted over her dress, her hair, the bare ring finger she'd tucked against her lap. You look tired, Clara. You should take better care of yourself. Before she could respond, before she could figure out what response wouldn't make her either cry or scream, Ryan's date appeared at his elbow. She was 23, blonde, and looked at Clara like she was a potted plant. Babe, they're seating, the girl said, tugging Ryan's sleeve. Coming, sweetheart? Ryan turned back to Clara, his smile poisonous with pity. Good seeing you. Try to enjoy yourself, yeah? I know these fancy things aren't really your scene. Clara watched him walk away and felt something inside her crack wider. She made it through dinner by pushing food around her plate and nodding at the appropriate moments when the strangers at her table tried to include her in conversation. She made it through the toast by staring at her water glass. She made it through to the first dance by focusing on the exit signs and calculating how early she could leave without causing a scene. She didn't make it through her mother. Barbara Bennett found her during the salad course, her expression the particular kind of disappointed Clara had grown up with. Clara, your hair's falling down. Clara's hand went automatically to her twist. I'll fix it. Her mother's gaze swept over her. I'm glad you came, but honestly, sitting here alone like this, people are starting to notice. Margaret Hartley asked me if you'd brought anyone, and I had to explain about the divorce again. I'm sorry. The apology was automatic, carved into her by years of practice. You should be meeting people, moving on. You're still young enough to find someone decent, but not if you just... Barbara gestured vaguely at Clara's entire existence. Sit in corners looking miserable. Vanessa managed to bounce back after her broken engagement. There's no reason you can't do the same. Vanessa's broken engagement had lasted 6 months and ended because she'd found someone richer. Clara's divorce had ended because her husband decided being a father was inconvenient and being married to a pediatric nurse instead of a corporate lawyer was embarrassing. I'll try to look happier, Clara said. Her mother sighed. Just try not to draw attention to yourself, darling. This is Vanessa's day. When had Clara ever drawn attention to herself? She escaped to the bathroom after her mother left, locked herself in a stall, and pressed her palms against her eyes until the urge to cry passed. She would not break down at her sister's wedding. She would not give them that. When she came back out, she found Ryan holding court near the bar with 3 groomsmen, telling some story that had them all laughing. He caught her eye across the room and raised his glass in a mock toast. Clara turned away and walked straight into a wall of expensive cologne and solid muscle. Careful. The voice was low, rough-edged, and came from somewhere above her head. Clara looked up and found herself staring at a man who absolutely did not belong at her sister's society wedding. He was tall, easily 6'3", built like someone who worked with his hands despite the Italian suit that probably cost more than Clara's car. Dark hair swept back, sharp cheekbones, a jaw that looked carved. His eyes were the color of good whiskey, and they were looking at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. I'm sorry, Clara managed. I wasn't watching where I was going. No one's watching you at all, he said, and it wasn't a question. That's the problem. Clara blinked. You've been sitting alone all night. Your family keeps walking past like you're furniture, and that asshole at table 3 keeps looking at you like he owns the satisfaction of watching you suffer. The man's gaze flicked across the room to Ryan, then back to Clara. Ex-husband? How did you... The way you flinched when he laughed. He studied her for a moment longer, then seemed to come to a decision. I'm Luca. Clara. I know. At her startled look, he gestured slightly. Place cards. I'm at table 7. Been watching you try to disappear for the last hour. Heat crept up Clara's neck. That's kind of creepy. Probably. He didn't look particularly bothered by the assessment. You want to get out of here? Clara's heart jumped. What? Not like that. His mouth curved slightly, not quite a smile. I mean, leave the ballroom. There's a terrace. You look like you could use 5 minutes where no one's staring at you like you're a problem they wish they'd solved differently. She should say no. She didn't know this man. He could be anyone, anything. But then Ryan's laugh carried across the room again, and her mother's voice echoed in her head. Try not to draw attention to yourself. And Clara heard herself say, okay. Luca didn't offer his arm or make a show of it. He just turned and walked toward the terrace doors, expecting her to follow. Clara did, slipping through the crowd in his wake like a shadow, invisible as always, except now it felt like a choice. The terrace was blessedly empty, the Chicago skyline spreading out in all directions, lights blinking like stars brought down to earth. The November air bit cold, but Clara welcomed it. Anything was better than the suffocating warmth inside. Better? Luca asked. Yes. Clara wrapped her arms around herself. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. He shrugged out of his jacket and held it out. When she hesitated, he added, You're shivering. She was. Clara took the jacket, the weight of it settling over her shoulders like armor. It smelled like expensive fabric and something darker, earthier, safe somehow. You didn't answer my question earlier, Luca said, leaning against the railing. Ex-husband? 2 years divorced. Clara didn't know why she was telling him this. He's here with his girlfriend, who's younger than me and probably doesn't have stretch marks or a kid who wakes up with nightmares. He looks like the kind of man who thinks his own mediocrity is everyone else's fault. Clara laughed before she could stop herself, the sound surprised and genuine. That's actually pretty accurate. And your family? Thinks I'm the mistake. The words came out before Clara could filter them, truth she'd never said out loud spilling into the cold air. My sister's perfect. I'm the one who got pregnant too young, married the wrong guy, works too much and still can't make ends meet. I'm the embarrassment they invite out of obligation. Luca was quiet for a moment, his gaze on the skyline. When he spoke, his voice was careful. How old's your kid? 4. Emma. She's... Clara smiled despite everything. She's the best thing I ever did, the only thing I got right. Then you got the most important thing right. He turned to look at her, those whiskey eyes serious. Everything else is just noise. Clara felt something crack in her chest, something that had been holding together with wire and sheer stubbornness. Before she could embarrass herself by crying, she changed the subject. What about you? Why are you here? Business connection with the groom's father. You don't sound thrilled about it. Weddings aren't really my thing. His mouth quirked again, that almost smile. Too many people pretending everything's perfect. But you came anyway. Sometimes you do things because they're expected, not because you want to. He pushed off the railing, moving closer. I'm guessing you understand that. Clara nodded. She understood it bone deep. They stood in silence for a while, the sound of the reception muted behind them. Clara should go back inside. She should return his jacket and thank him for the kindness and disappear back to table 12. Instead, she said, I should probably warn you, being seen talking to me won't win you any points with the bride's family. Good thing I don't give a fuck about points. The casual profanity shouldn't have been attractive. Clara had spent her whole life around men who measured their words carefully, who used politeness as a weapon. Luca's bluntness was jarring and oddly comforting. Besides, he continued, I have a better idea. What? Come back inside with me. Let me be your date for the rest of the night. Clara stared at him. What? You heard me. Luca stepped closer, and Clara realized for the first time just how much space he took up, how solid he was. Everyone in there thinks you're alone and miserable. Let's give them something else to think about. You want to pretend to be my boyfriend? Why not? You get to stop being invisible. I get interesting company instead of business small talk. Your ex gets to choke on his champagne. Everybody wins. It was insane. Clara didn't do things like this. She followed rules, kept her head down, made herself small. Safe. But Safe had gotten her a divorce and a family who couldn't be bothered to seat her at their table. Safe had gotten her 2 years of Ryan's pity and her mother's disappointment. Okay, Clara said. Luca's eyebrows rose slightly. Yeah? Yeah. Her heart was hammering, but she didn't take it back. Let's do it. You're sure? Because once we walk back in there together, people are going to talk. Let them talk. Clara lifted her chin, channeling a confidence she absolutely didn't feel. I'm tired of being quiet. Something shifted in Luca's expression, approval mixing with something sharper. All right then. He offered his arm this time, formal and old-fashioned. Ready? Clara slipped her hand into the crook of his elbow, feeling the muscle beneath the expensive fabric, and let him lead her back toward the light and noise. Her hand was shaking. He probably felt it. He didn't mention it. The reaction when they walked back into the ballroom was immediate and gratifying in ways Clara hadn't anticipated. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. She felt the weight of 200 pairs of eyes landing on her and Luca, speculation spreading like ripples in water. They're staring, Clara whispered. Let them. Luca's hand covered hers where it rested on his arm, warm and steady. You want to go back to your table, or should we give them a real show? What kind of show? Instead of answering, Luca guided her toward the dance floor where couples swayed to something slow and romantic. Clara's heart kicked against her ribs. I'm not a good dancer, she said. I am. He turned her into his arms with practiced ease, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers. Just follow my lead. It should have been awkward. Clara barely knew this man. But something about the way Luca held her, firm enough to guide but gentle enough to let her pull away if she wanted, made it easy to let him lead. They moved together, and Clara found herself relaxing into it despite the stares. Your ex is watching, Luca said quietly, his breath warm against her temple. Looks like someone shoved a lemon down his throat. Clara couldn't help it. She laughed, soft and genuine, and felt Luca's hand tighten slightly at her waist. There you go, he murmured. That's better. What is? You. Actually smiling instead of trying to make yourself invisible. Clara looked up at him, at the sharp lines of his face and those impossible eyes, and felt something shift in her chest. Dangerous, her brain supplied. This man was dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with the wedding reception or her family's judgment. Who are you, really? She asked. Someone who recognized another person trying to survive a room full of people who don't see them. His thumb brushed against her waist, a gesture so small she might have imagined it. Does it matter? It should. Clara had spent her whole adult life being careful, making safe choices, protecting herself and Emma from anything that might hurt them. But right now, in the arms of a stranger who looked at her like she was worth seeing, she couldn't remember why careful mattered. No, she said. I guess it doesn't. The song ended. Another started. They kept dancing. Across the room, Clara caught sight of her mother staring, her expression a complicated mix of shock and calculation. Vanessa had paused mid-conversation with wedding guests, her perfect smile frozen. Ryan wasn't even pretending not to stare, his face twisted with something that might have been jealousy or disbelief or both. For the first time all night, Clara didn't care what any of them thought. Thank you, she said quietly. Luca's hand traced a slow circle at the small of her back. For what? For seeing me. His eyes darkened with something she couldn't name. Luca Moretti. The voice cut through the music like a knife through silk. Clara felt Luca's whole body tense, his hand tightening reflexively at her waist before he carefully, deliberately relaxed. The man approaching them was shorter than Luca, but carried himself like violence wrapped in expensive tailoring. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Marcus. Luca's voice had changed, gone flat and careful. Didn't expect to see you here. Business brings me everywhere. Marcus's gaze slid to Clara, assessing and dismissive in the same glance. Aren't you going to introduce me to your friend? No. No? Marcus's smile widened. That's not very polite, Luca, especially when you're dancing with her in front of God and everyone. He turned to Clara. I'm Marcus Reed. And you are? Leaving, Luca said before Clara could answer. His hand at her waist guided her firmly toward the edge of the dance floor. Excuse us. They were halfway across the ballroom before Marcus's laughter followed them, low and knowing. Luca didn't stop until they'd reached the relative privacy of a corner near the coat check, away from the main reception. Only then did he release her, stepping back with carefully controlled movements. I need to tell you something, he said. Clara's stomach dropped at his tone. Okay. That man, Marcus, he's not someone you want to be associated with, and unfortunately, neither am I. Luca ran a hand through his hair, the first sign of agitation she'd seen from him. This was a mistake. I shouldn't have dragged you into... This was a bad idea. What are you talking about? I'm not a good man, Clara. The business I'm in, the people I know, you don't want any part of that. What business? He looked at her for a long moment, something almost like regret crossing his face. The kind that means men like Marcus show up at weddings to remind me they're watching. The kind that means getting close to me puts a target on anyone I care about. Claire's mind raced, putting pieces together she probably should have seen earlier. The way people had given Luca space when they walked through the ballroom. The expensive suit and the controlled violence in how he moved. The fact that a dangerous-looking man had sought him out with what felt like a warning disguised as a greeting. You're... she started. Yeah. His jaw was tight. So this game we've been playing? It ends now. You go back to your table, I'll leave early, and we both forget this happened. He started to turn away. Wait. Clara's hand shot out, catching his sleeve. He froze. What if I don't want to forget? Luca turned back slowly. You don't know what you're saying. Maybe not, but I know what I saw in there. Clara gestured toward the ballroom. For 1 hour, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't the disappointment or the cautionary tale or the woman barely holding it together. I was just me. Someone worth seeing. Clara, I'm not saying I want to get involved in whatever your business is, she interrupted, her heart racing. I'm saying thank you for tonight, for making me feel like I matter, even if it was just pretend. Something in Luca's expression cracked. It wasn't pretend. The words hung between them, loaded with meaning Clara didn't know how to unpack. Before either of them could figure out what to say next, raised voices erupted from the ballroom. Luca's whole body went on alert, his hand automatically reaching for Clara's arm to pull her behind him. Stay here. But Clara was already moving, her nurse's instinct kicking in at the sound of someone shouting for help. They pushed through the crowd that had gathered near table 3 and found Ryan on the floor, his face red, his hands at his throat. His girlfriend was screaming. People stood in a useless circle, frozen by panic and expensive wine. Clara's training took over. She dropped to her knees beside Ryan, her hands already moving to check his airway. Someone call 911. Now! He's choking, his girlfriend sobbed. He just started choking. Clara's fingers found the obstruction, a piece of steak lodged in Ryan's throat, and she made the split-second decision. She'd done the Heimlich maneuver 100 times on the pediatric ward, but never on her ex-husband at her sister's wedding with 200 people watching. It took 3 compressions before the meat dislodged, Ryan gasping and coughing as air rushed back into his lungs. The crowd exhaled collectively. Someone started clapping. Clara sat back on her heels, her hands shaking now with adrenaline, and looked up to find half the wedding staring at her with something like shock. Her mother's face was pale. Vanessa looked torn between relief and irritation that her reception had been interrupted. Ryan, still gasping, looked up at Clara with watery eyes. You saved... Yeah, Clara said quietly. I did. A hand appeared in her field of vision. Luca's. She took it and let him pull her to her feet, his grip solid and warm. You okay? He asked, low enough that only she could hear. I think so. That was incredible. That was my job. But Clara was still shaking, the reality of what had just happened starting to sink in. She'd just saved Ryan's life. Ryan, who'd spent the last 2 years making her feel worthless. The irony was almost funny. The paramedics arrived 12 minutes later, checking Ryan over despite his insistence that he was fine. Clara gave them a quick rundown of what had happened, her professional voice steady, even as her hand still trembled slightly. When they finally cleared out and the reception tried to resume some semblance of normalcy, Clara found herself alone again, or as alone as you could be in a room full of people who were now whispering about her for entirely different reasons. She was reaching for her purse, thinking about calling a car and getting the hell out, when Luca appeared at her elbow. Dance with me again, he said. Luca, one more dance, then I'll let you go. Clara knew she should refuse, should take the out he was offering and walk away from whatever this was, but she'd been careful her whole life, and where had it gotten her? One more dance, she agreed. This time when Luca took her in his arms, it felt different, more real. The pretense had burned away, leaving something raw and honest in its place. You were right earlier, Clara said as they moved together, when you said this was a mistake. Luca's arms tightened fractionally around her. Clara, I'm a single mother who can barely make rent. I work doubles to afford groceries. I drive a car that's one breakdown away from the junkyard. I don't fit in your world any more than I fit in theirs. She nodded toward her family's tables. This was nice. It was amazing, but it's not real. What if I want it to be? Clara's breath caught. You don't mean that. I don't say things I don't mean. Luca's hand at her back pressed her closer, until she could feel the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. I know this is fast. I know it's insane, but I haven't been able to stop looking at you since you walked in tonight trying to make yourself invisible. And every time you smile like you're surprised you're allowed to, something in my chest feels like it's breaking open. Luca, I'm not a good man, he continued, his voice rough. I do things your family would clutch their pearls over. But I see you, Clara, really see you, and I think you see me too. Clara's eyes burned. She should pull away, should end this before it got any more complicated. But she couldn't make herself let go. I have a daughter, she whispered. I know. That's not something I take lightly. I can't bring people into her life who aren't going to stay. I know that too. So what are you saying? Luca pulled back just enough to look at her, his eyes intense and honest. I'm saying, let me take you to dinner. Somewhere that's not a wedding, where we're not pretending. Just you and me figuring out if this thing between us is real. And if it is, then we'll figure out the rest. His thumb traced her cheekbone, gentle despite the calluses. I know you're scared. You should be. But Clara, watching you save your asshole ex-husband's life with your bare hands while half of Chicago society stood around being useless, you're a lot braver than you think you are. Clara laughed, the sound watery. That was just training. That was you being extraordinary and not even realizing it. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch impossibly gentle. So what do you say? One dinner, no pressure. You can bring pepper spray if it makes you feel better. She should say no. Every rational part of her brain was screaming to say no, to walk away from this beautiful, dangerous man who looked at her like she was worth something. But Clara was tired of being rational, tired of being safe, tired of making herself small. Okay, she said. One dinner. Luca's smile was the first real one she'd seen from him all night, transforming his face from handsome to devastating. Yeah? Yeah, but not somewhere fancy. I can't afford my treat. Luca. Clara. He said her name like a promise. Let me take care of this, please. And because something in his voice made it sound less like pity and more like he genuinely wanted to, Clara nodded. They danced until the song ended, and then another, and then one more. By the time Clara finally said she needed to go, needed to get back to Emma, needed to process everything that had happened, it was past 11 and the reception was winding down. Luca walked her to her car, his jacket still around her shoulders. Keep it, he said when she started to take it off. You can give it back at dinner. That's just an excuse to make sure I show up. Is it working? Clara smiled despite herself. Yeah, it's working. He waited while she unlocked her car, a 15-year-old Honda with a dent in the passenger door, and then held the door open for her like she was driving something worth 10 times as much. Give me your phone, he said. Clara handed it over, watched him type in his number, and send himself a text so he'd have hers. Friday night, he said, handing it back. I'll pick you up at 7. You don't know where I live. You just gave me your number. I'll figure it out. At her alarmed look, he added, by asking you. Jesus, Clara, I'm not going to show up at your door like a stalker. Right, sorry, I'm not used to this. Used to what? Any of this. Men like you. Nights like tonight. Feeling like maybe I'm not completely broken. Luca's expression went soft in a way that made Clara's chest ache. He reached out, cupped her face in his hand, and for one breathless moment she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he pressed his lips to her forehead, gentle and reverent, and whispered, You're not broken, Clara. You're just surrounded by people who can't see how strong you are. Then he stepped back, closed her car door, and waited until she'd started the engine and pulled away before turning back toward the hotel. Clara drove home in a daze, Luca's jacket wrapped around her, his scent surrounding her, her lips still tingling from the ghost of a kiss that hadn't happened. When she got home and paid Mrs. Chen from next door, when she checked on Emma, asleep and perfect, when she finally collapsed into her own bed, Clara stared at the ceiling and tried to convince herself that tonight had actually happened. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Made it home safe? Clara smiled and typed back, yes, thank you for tonight. The response came immediately. Thank you for saying yes. Sleep well, Clara. She fell asleep with her phone on her pillow and Luca's jacket still around her shoulders. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she didn't dream about drowning. She dreamed about whiskey-colored eyes and strong hands, and the possibility that maybe, just maybe, she deserved something more than surviving. The text from Luca came at 6:30 Friday morning while Clara was making Emma's breakfast and trying not to think about the fact that she had a date in 12.5 hours. Still on for tonight? Clara stared at her phone, pancake batter dripping from the spatula in her other hand. Part of her had convinced herself he wouldn't follow through. Men like Luca Moretti didn't actually call women like her. The whole thing had probably been some kind of fever dream brought on by wedding champagne and humiliation. But here was his text, simple and direct, asking if she was still willing to show up. Emma tugged on her scrub pants. Mama, the pancake's burning. Shit, shoot. Clara flipped the pancake, revealing a surface closer to charcoal than golden brown. She scraped it onto a plate anyway. Emma would eat it with enough syrup. Her phone buzzed again. If you're having second thoughts, that's okay. No pressure. Clara typed one-handed while pouring more batter. No second thoughts, just burning breakfast. That's oddly reassuring. Why? Means you're human. I'll pick you up at 7. Wear something comfortable. Clara looked down at her scrubs, blue with cartoon bears, courtesy of working pediatrics, and tried to remember the last time she'd worn something that qualified as date-appropriate. Most of her wardrobe consisted of work clothes, yoga pants, and the 3 dresses she rotated through for anything requiring actual effort. Emma climbed into her chair, eyeing the burnt pancake with 4-year-old skepticism. Is it supposed to be black? It's crispy, very crispy. Clara drowned it in syrup and cut it into pieces. Try it. Her daughter took a cautious bite, chewed thoughtfully, and announced, It tastes like the toast when you forgot about it last week. Thank you for that honest review. Clara kissed the top of Emma's head and tried to ignore the anxiety creeping up her spine. What was she doing? She had a 12-hour shift starting in 40 minutes, a rent check due in 3 days that would leave her account dangerously close to empty, and absolutely no business going on a date with a man who probably had connections to organized crime. But when she dropped Emma off at preschool and headed to the hospital, Clara caught herself smiling at nothing. The surgical resident doing rounds with her asked if she'd won the lottery. Clara just shook her head and focused on her patients, but the lightness in her chest wouldn't fade. By 4 o'clock, she was exhausted and second-guessing everything. By 5, she'd talked herself out of going twice. By 6, she was standing in her bedroom in her bra and the 4th outfit she'd tried on, fighting the urge to text Luca and cancel. Her phone rang. Unknown number, but Clara answered anyway, half hoping it was him calling the whole thing off. Clara Bennett? The voice was female, crisp, professional. Yes? This is Detective Sarah Reeves with the Chicago PD. I'm hoping you have a few minutes to answer some questions. Clara's stomach dropped. About what? About Luca Moretti. Of course. Of course this was how her night was going to start. I don't really know him, Clara said carefully, sitting down on her bed. We met at a wedding last weekend. The Hartley Chen wedding at the Four Seasons. Yes. Multiple witnesses saw you spending significant time with Mr. Moretti, dancing, leaving the ballroom together, having what appeared to be intimate conversations. Detective Reeves paused. Ms. Bennett, do you know who Luca Moretti is? Someone with business connections? Clara's voice came out smaller than she wanted. He's the head of the Moretti organization, one of the largest criminal enterprises in Chicago. Drug trafficking, illegal gambling, extortion, money laundering, the list goes on. Clara closed her eyes. She'd known. She'd known the moment Marcus Reed had approached them with that knife-edge smile. But hearing it laid out in official police terminology made it real in a way denial couldn't fix. I didn't know the specifics, she said quietly, but I suspected. And you're still planning to see him again? Clara's head snapped up. How did you? We've had surveillance on Moretti for 6 months. He made several calls this week regarding dinner reservations and what appeared to be date planning. Detective Reeves's voice softened slightly. Ms. Bennett, I'm not calling to threaten you or tell you what to do, but I want you to understand what you're getting into. Luca Moretti is dangerous. The people around him are dangerous. Women who get involved with men like him often end up as collateral damage. I'm just going to dinner. That's how it starts. A pause. Look, I've been doing this job for 15 years. I've seen what happens when civilians get mixed up with organized crime. It never ends well. If you care about your daughter, and I know you do, because we've done our homework, you'll end this before it begins. Claire should have been angry about the invasion of privacy, the casual mention of Emma like she was a pressure point to exploit. Instead, she just felt tired. Is there anything else, Detective? Just think about it. That's all I'm asking. Reeves gave her a number to call if she changed her mind, if she wanted protection, if she needed help getting away from something that hadn't even started yet. When Clara hung up, she stared at her reflection in the mirror. The black dress she'd settled on looked nice enough. Nothing fancy, but it fit well and didn't scream single mother on a budget. Her hair was down, actually cooperating for once. She'd done her makeup carefully, taking time she didn't usually have. She looked like someone going on a date. Someone normal. The knock on her door came at exactly 7 o'clock. Clara had arranged for Mrs. Chen to watch Emma for the evening, and her daughter was already next door, happily helping their neighbor make dumplings. Which meant Clara had no excuse to stall when she opened the door and found Luca standing in her hallway, looking like sin in dark jeans and a black Henley. "Hi," she said, hating how breathless she sounded. "Hi yourself." "Oh." His eyes traveled over her, warm and appreciative without being lewd. "You look beautiful." "You clean up pretty well, too." Clara grabbed her purse, then hesitated. "I need to tell you something." Luca's expression shifted, guarded. "Okay." "Chicago PD called me today. Detective Reeves. She wanted to warn me about you." "Shit." He ran a hand through his hair. "Clara, I'm sorry. I didn't think they'd—" "She told me what you do. What you really do." Clara met his eyes. "I'm guessing she wasn't exaggerating." "Probably not." Luca's jaw was tight. "You want to cancel? I'll understand." Clara should say yes. Should close the door, call Detective Reeves, and forget this whole thing. Instead, she stepped into the hallway and locked her apartment behind her. "I'm still here, aren't I?" "You sure about this?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." She started toward the stairs. The elevator in her building had been broken for 3 weeks. "Where are we going?" "You'll see." Luca's car was a black Mercedes that probably cost more than Clara made in 2 years. He held the door for her, waited until she was settled, then walked around to the driver's side with the kind of controlled grace that suggested violence was always an option, just not the first one. They drove in silence for a while, Chicago sliding past the windows in familiar patterns. Clara tried not to fidget with her purse strap. "You're nervous," Luca said finally. "A cop called me this morning to tell me you're basically a mob boss." "Yeah, I'm a little nervous." "You want me to take you home?" "If I wanted to go home, I would have said no when you picked me up." Clara looked at him. "I'm nervous because I like you, and I don't know if that makes me stupid or brave or just desperate for someone to see me the way you did last Saturday." Luca's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "You're not stupid, and you're definitely not desperate." "Then what am I?" "Trying to figure out if I'm worth the risk." He glanced at her, those whiskey eyes serious. "Fair warning, I'm probably not." "Why did you ask me out if you think that?" "Because I'm selfish." He turned down a side street Clara didn't recognize. "Because I looked at you sitting alone at that wedding and something in my chest cracked open. Because I can't stop thinking about the way you saved your ex-husband's life without hesitation, even though he's treated you like garbage. Because you're the first person in years who's looked at me like I might be more than the worst thing I've ever done." Clara's breath caught. "Luca, I know it's fast, I know it's insane, but I'm not going to lie to you, Clara. Not about what I want." He pulled into a parking spot and killed the engine. "I want to know everything about you. What makes you laugh? What keeps you up at night? How you take your coffee? What you dream about? I want to meet your daughter and prove to you that I'm not the kind of man who walks away when things get complicated. And I want to be the person you think about when you're trying to fall asleep." He turned to face her fully, and Clara felt pinned by the intensity in his gaze. "But more than any of that," Luca continued quietly, "I want you to feel safe. Which means, if this is too much, if I'm too much, you tell me right now and I drive you home and we pretend this never happened." Clara looked at him, really looked. At the sharp angles of his face and the careful way he held himself, like he was trying not to take up too much space despite being built like he could break things without effort. At the way he watched her like she was something precious he was afraid to touch wrong. "I don't want to pretend it never happened," she said. Luca exhaled, something like relief crossing his face. "No? No. But I need you to understand something too." Clara twisted her purse strap between her fingers. "I have a daughter. She's my whole world. I don't bring men around her unless I'm sure they're going to stay. So if you're just looking for something casual, I'm not. You don't know that. You barely know me. I know enough." Luca reached across the console, his hand hovering near hers like he was asking permission. Clara took it, felt his fingers close around hers, warm and solid. "I know you work doubles to make ends meet. I know you put everyone else first even when it costs you. I know you're strong as hell and don't see it. I know when you smile for real, it's like the sun coming out, and I know I want the chance to learn the rest." Clara's eyes burned. "You can't just say things like that." "Why not?" "Because it makes me want to believe you." "Good." He lifted her hand, pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "Believe me, Clara, I'm not going anywhere unless you tell me to." They sat there for a moment, hands linked, the city breathing around them through the windshield. Then Luca smiled, that rare real one that transformed his whole face. "Come on, I'm starving, and you need to eat something that's not burnt pancakes." "How did you texted me about burning breakfast this morning, remember?" Right. Clara had been so nervous she'd forgotten half their text conversation. Luca led her down the block to a small Italian restaurant tucked between a dry cleaner and a bookstore. The sign above the door was hand-painted, faded, but charming. Angelina's. "This doesn't look like a place you'd normally go," Clara said. "It's not." He held the door for her. "It's a place you'd normally go. I asked around. Inside was warm and smelled like garlic and fresh bread. Red checkered tablecloths, candles in wine bottles, framed photos covering every inch of wall space. An older woman looked up from behind the counter and her whole face lit up. "Luca, finally you bring a girl!" She rushed around to envelope him in a hug that would have been comical if Luca hadn't returned it with genuine affection. 34 years I'm waiting for this. "Clara, this is Angelina. She's been feeding me since I was 6. Luca disentangled himself gently. "Angelina, this is Clara Bennett." Finally, a name and a face. Angelina turned to Clara, taking both her hands. "You are beautiful." He has good taste, even if it took him forever. "Come, come, I have the best table." She led them to a corner booth, talking the whole way about how Luca used to come in after school and do his homework at the counter, while she made him pasta. Clara caught Luca's slight embarrassment and found it endearing. "You were going to tell me to order whatever I wanted," Clara said once they were alone, menus in hand. "How did you know?" "Because that's what people do on first dates. But I'm going to tell you right now, I can't eat somewhere this nice and let you pay for everything without feeling weird about it." Luca set down his menu. "Okay, new rule. Tonight's on me. Next time, you pick the place and we split it. Fair? Next time?" "I'm optimistic." His mouth quirked. "Is that okay?" Clara found herself smiling despite her nerves. "Yeah, that's okay." They ordered. Angelina insisted they try the ossobuco and ignored Luca's attempt to order anything else, and fell into conversation that felt easier than it should have. Luca asked about her work, actually listened when she talked about her patients, asked follow-up questions that proved he was paying attention. Clara asked about his childhood, learned he'd grown up in Little Italy with his grandmother after his parents died, that Angelina had basically raised him alongside her own kids. "You never talk about what you do now," Clara said carefully, watching him over her wine glass. "No, I don't." Because it's dangerous or because you think I can't handle it? Luca was quiet for a moment. Both. The less you know, the safer you are. Detective Reeves seemed to think I was already in danger just by being seen with you. Reeves is good at her job. She's not wrong. He leaned back, studying her. You should be running, Clara. Anyone with sense would be running. Maybe I'm tired of making the sensible choice. Or maybe you're braver than you know. The food arrived, and Clara had to admit it was the best thing she'd eaten in months. They shared bites across the table, Luca stealing from her plate and letting her try his, the intimacy of it feeling natural. Angelina checked on them 3 times, each visit including some story about Luca as a kid that made him groan and Clara laugh. She's never going to let me live any of this down, Luca said after Angelina had finished a story about 8-year-old Luca trying to make tiramisu and flooding the kitchen. I like her. She clearly loves you. She's the reason I didn't end up dead or in prison by 20. His voice went serious. After my parents died, I was angry, could have gone a lot of ways, most of them bad, but Angelina and my grandmother kept pulling me back. And now? Now I run the family business, which isn't making tiramisu, unfortunately. Clara set down her fork. Tell me one thing, just one thing about what you actually do. Luca studied her for a long moment. Why? Because everyone else is telling me who you are. I want to hear it from you. He was quiet so long Clara thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I protect people. The neighborhood I grew up in, the businesses that can't afford police protection, the families who get squeezed by bigger fish. Yeah, there's money in it. Yeah, some of what we do crosses lines. But at the end of the day, I take care of my people. That's what matters to me. It wasn't the whole truth. Clara wasn't naive enough to think it was. But it was honest enough to feel real. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For not lying. They finished dinner, Luca arguing with Angelina over the check until the older woman threw up her hands and told him to just leave a ridiculous tip. On the sidewalk outside, the November wind had picked up, and Clara shivered despite her coat. Come here. Luca pulled her against his side, his arm around her shoulders blocking the worst of the wind. They walked like that for a block before Clara realized they weren't heading back to his car. Where are we going? There's a coffee shop around the corner. Best hot chocolate in Chicago. Unless you want me to take you home. Hot chocolate sounds good. The coffee shop was tiny, barely room for 6 tables, but warm and filled with the scent of chocolate and cinnamon. Luca ordered for both of them while Clara found a table by the window. When he sat down across from her, 2 steaming mugs between them, something in his expression had shifted. What? Clara asked. I keep waiting for you to bolt. Should I? Probably. He wrapped his hands around his mug. But I really hope you don't. Clara sipped her hot chocolate. He was right, it was incredible, and tried to organize her thoughts. Can I ask you something? Anything. What happened with that man at the wedding? Marcus. Luca's whole body went tense. What about him? The way he looked at me, the way he talked to you. It felt like a threat. It was. Against me or you? Both, maybe. Luca's jaw worked. Marcus runs a rival organization. We've had an uneasy truce for about 3 years, but he's been pushing boundaries, testing to see where my lines are. And me being there made you visible to him, which is a problem. He met her eyes. That's why I tried to end things that night. Why I told you being seen with me was dangerous. Because it is, Clara. Men like Marcus, they'll use anything they can to get leverage, and you... He stopped, shook his head. I what? You're someone I could actually care about, which makes you a target. Clara's heart was racing. Is that why you asked me out? To warn me? I asked you out because I couldn't stop thinking about you. The warning's just the truth you deserve to know. Luca leaned forward. I can protect you. I have resources, people, ways of making sure you and Emma stay safe. But that only works if you trust me. I barely know you. I know. But you're here anyway. His hand crossed the table, palm up, offering. So trust me or don't. Either way, I'm being honest with you. That's more than most people in my world get. Clara looked at his hand, scarred knuckles, calloused palm, fingers that had probably done terrible things. She thought about Detective Reeves's warning, about Emma asleep next door, trusting that her mother would keep her safe. about every careful choice Clara had made for 28 years that had left her alone and invisible. She took his hand. "Okay," she said. "I trust you." Luca's fingers closed around hers, and Clara saw something vulnerable cross his face before he locked it down. They finished their hot chocolate talking about lighter things, movies they'd seen, places they wanted to travel, the small details that made up a life. Clara told him about Emma's obsession with dinosaurs. Luca told her about the boat he was restoring in a garage somewhere on the south side. By the time they left, it was past 10, and Clara was exhausted in the best way, the kind of tired that came from laughing too much and talking too long. Luca drove her home, his hand finding hers on the console like it belonged there. "I had a really good time," Clara said when he pulled up outside her building. "Good enough for that second date?" "Yeah, good enough for that." Luca walked her to her door despite her protests about the neighborhood. At her threshold, he stopped, his hand coming up to cup her face. "I'm going to kiss you now," he said, "if that's okay." Clara's breath caught. "Okay." He kissed her slowly, carefully, like she was something that might break. His mouth was warm and tasted like chocolate, and when his thumb brushed her cheekbone, Clara felt herself melt into it. It wasn't the kind of kiss that demanded more. It was the kind that promised everything. When Luca pulled back, his eyes were dark and his breathing wasn't quite steady. "I'll call you tomorrow," he said. "Okay. Get some sleep." "You too." Clara let herself into her apartment and leaned against the door, her heart racing. Through the wall, she could hear Emma's laugh and Mrs. Chen's patient voice. Normal life, waiting for her on the other side of one perfect date. Her phone buzzed. "Luca. Inside safe?" Clara. "Yes. Thank you for tonight." Luca. "Thank you for saying yes." Again. She fell asleep with her phone on her nightstand and the taste of him still on her lips. And if a small voice in her head whispered that she was making a mistake, Clara was too happy to listen. The flowers arrived at the hospital Monday morning, 24 white roses with a card that read, "Thinking about you." Clara's coworkers made enough noise about it that her supervisor poked her head into the break room to see what the fuss was about. "Someone has an admirer," Jen, one of the other nurses, sing-songed. "It's not. We just went on one date," Clara protested, but she was smiling. "One date with a guy who sends 24 roses to your workplace?" Jen clutched her chest dramatically. "Marry him. I'm serious. Marry him immediately." Clara laughed and tried to ignore the warmth spreading through her chest. She took a photo of the flowers and texted it to Luca. "You're going to spoil me." His response came quickly. "That's the idea." They texted throughout the day, nothing important, just small exchanges that made Clara smile at random moments. He asked about her shift. She asked if he'd worked on his boat. It was normal and sweet and made the 12-hour day feel shorter. Wednesday, he showed up at the hospital at the end of her shift with coffee and the quiet statement that he was driving her home. "You can't just show up at my work," Clara protested weakly. "I just did." He handed her the coffee. Perfect. Exactly how she liked it, even though she'd never told him. "You look tired in the photo you sent this morning. Figured you could use a ride." They drove through evening traffic while Clara talked about a 3-year-old patient who'd tried to convince her that dinosaurs were better than medicine. Luca listened like it was the most important story he'd ever heard. Friday, he took her to a food truck festival on the south side. They ate tacos and empanadas and Thai curry standing up, grease dripping down their fingers, laughing like teenagers. Clara forgot to be self-conscious, forgot to worry about what people thought when they looked at them together. She just existed, happy and present. "I want you to meet Emma," she said as they walked back to his car. Luca stopped. "You sure about that?" "No, but I want to anyway." Clara turned to face him. "She's going to love you or she's going to hate you, and I need to know which before I—" She stopped, the words catching. "Before you what?" "Before I fall completely," Clara didn't say. "Before I start building a future in my head that includes you." "Before we keep doing this," she said instead. Luca studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay. When?" "Sunday? I'm off. We could go to the park or something low pressure." "Sunday works." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "For what it's worth, I'm terrified." "Of Emma?" "Of screwing this up, of being the wrong choice. Of you waking up one day and realizing you deserve better than someone whose business card would say criminal enterprise if I were honest about it. Clara reached up, framed his face with her hands. Stop waiting for me to run. I'm still here. I know, that's what terrifies me. He kissed her then, and Clara stopped thinking about Sunday or Detective Reeves or whether she was making the biggest mistake of her life. She just kissed him back and let herself fall. Sunday morning arrived with the kind of anxiety that made Clara check her reflection 4 times before Emma even woke up. She'd changed outfits twice, settled on jeans and a sweater that didn't look like she was trying too hard, then second-guessed that choice entirely. "Mama, why are you weird today?" Emma asked over cereal, her dinosaur pajamas still wrinkled from sleep. "I'm not weird. You keep looking at the door." Emma swung her legs, heels thumping against the chair. "Are we going somewhere?" "We're going to the park, and—" Clara took a breath. "And there's someone I want you to meet." Emma's eyes went wide. "A friend?" "Yeah, baby, a friend. A boyfriend or a girlfriend?" "A boyfriend. His name is Luca." Emma considered this with the seriousness only a 4-year-old could muster. "Does he like dinosaurs?" "I don't know. You'll have to ask him." "Okay." Emma returned to her cereal like the matter was settled. Clara wished her own nerves were that easy to dismiss. Luca texted at 9. "On my way, bringing supplies." Clara, "What kind of supplies?" Luca, "You'll see." He arrived at 9:30 carrying a grocery bag and looking nervous in a way Clara had never seen before. He'd dressed down, jeans, a dark blue sweater, boots, but he still looked too polished for her cramped apartment with its thrift store furniture and Emma's toys scattered across the floor. "Hi," Clara said, suddenly aware of how small her world was compared to his. "Hi." Luca's eyes found hers, held. "You okay?" "Terrified." "Me too." He held up the bag. "I brought provisions. Wasn't sure what 4-year-olds eat, so I got options." Before Clara could respond, Emma appeared from her bedroom, dragging her stuffed triceratops behind her. She stopped in the doorway, studying Luca with unnerving intensity. "You're really tall," Emma announced. Luca crouched down, bringing himself closer to her eye level. "I am. You must be Emma. Your mom's told me a lot about you." "Did she tell you about Rexy?" Emma held up the triceratops. "She mentioned you like dinosaurs." "I love dinosaurs. Do you?" Luca glanced at Clara, a flicker of help me in his eyes, before turning back to Emma. "I don't know much about them, but I'd like to learn." Emma's face lit up. "I can teach you. Did you know that triceratops had 3 horns and they could weigh as much as an elephant?" "I didn't know that." "Well, now you do." Emma tugged on his hand. "Come on, I'll show you my collection." Clara watched her daughter drag Luca toward her bedroom, chattering about herbivores in the Cretaceous period, and felt something loosen in her chest. He could have dismissed Emma's enthusiasm, could have stayed distant and awkward. Instead, he was letting a 4-year-old pull him into her world like it was the most important thing he'd do all day. 20 minutes later, Clara found them on Emma's bedroom floor, Luca obediently arranging plastic dinosaurs according to Emma's exacting specifications, while she explained the difference between a pterodactyl and a pteranodon. "That one's not right," Emma said, pointing at a stegosaurus. "No? Where should it go?" "Over there, with the other plant eaters. He's a herbivore." "Right, herbivore." Luca moved the dinosaur, caught Clara watching, and mouthed help over Emma's head. Clara bit back a smile. Why don't you get dressed? We're going to the park, remember?" "Can Luca come?" "That's the plan." "Okay." Emma bounded up, already pulling clothes from her drawer with no regard for matching. Luca extracted himself from the floor with surprising grace for someone his size. "How am I doing?" he asked quietly, once they were back in the living room. "You're doing great. She likes you. Yeah? She doesn't show just anyone her dinosaurs. That's a big deal." Something in Luca's expression softened. "She's amazing, Clara. Smart as hell." "She gets that from her mother," Clara said without thinking. "I know." He stepped closer, his hand finding the small of her back. "You okay with this? Me being here?" "Ask me again in an hour." He did kiss her then, quick and gentle, pulling back just as Emma emerged in purple leggings, a striped shirt, and mismatched socks. "I'm ready," Emma announced. "Can we go to the big park with the swings?" They drove to Lincoln Park, Emma chattering from the back seat about everything and nothing, while Luca navigated traffic with the patient focus of someone used to staying calm under pressure. Clara watched him interact with her daughter, answering questions, asking his own, never talking down to her, and felt the last of her walls starting to crack. At the playground, Emma made a beeline for the swings. Clara started to follow, but Luca caught her hand. "I've got her. You sit. Rest." "I rest when I'm dead." "Clara." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "When's the last time you sat down at a park and just watched instead of hovering?" She couldn't remember. Single mothers didn't get to sit. They pushed swings and monitored monkey bars and stayed vigilant. "Go," Luca said gently. "I'll keep her safe." Clara watched him jog after Emma, watched him help her onto the swing and start pushing with careful attention to her laughing demands for higher, higher. She sank onto a bench and felt exhaustion hit her like a wave. When had she last let someone else take care of things? When had she last trusted someone enough to let go? They stayed at the park for 2 hours. Emma ran herself ragged on the jungle gym while Luca spotted her, played an elaborate game involving dinosaurs escaping from the sandbox, and let her climb on his shoulders to reach the monkey bars she was still too short for. Clara took photos she knew she'd look at later and wonder if she was allowed to want this. On the way back to the car, Emma slipped her hand into Luca's like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Can we get ice cream?" she asked. "That's up to your mom," Luca said. Emma turned pleading eyes on Clara. "Please?" "It's November. It's freezing." "Ice cream doesn't have a season, Mama." Clara looked at Luca, who was clearly fighting a smile. "Don't you dare take her side." "I would never." But his eyes were laughing. They got ice cream. Emma got chocolate with gummy bears because apparently Luca was a pushover who couldn't say no to a 4-year-old. They sat outside the shop despite the cold, Emma between them on the bench, chocolate smeared across her face, while she told Luca about her preschool teacher and her best friend Madison, who had the same dinosaur lunchbox. "You're good with her," Clara said later, after Emma had fallen asleep in the car, sugar-crashed and content. "She's easy to be good with." Luca's hand found Clara's across the console. "Thank you for letting me meet her. Thank you for not running when she made you play dinosaurs for 45 minutes. "Are you kidding? I learned more about the Mesozoic era today than in my entire education." He squeezed her hand. "She's incredible, Clara. You're raising an incredible kid." Clara's throat went tight. "I'm trying. You're succeeding." They got back to her apartment building as the sun was starting to set. Luca carried Emma upstairs. She'd woken up just long enough to demand he carry her like a dinosaur, whatever that meant, and helped Clara get her settled on the couch with a movie. "I should go," Luca said quietly. "Let you guys have your evening." "You could stay. For dinner. Nothing fancy, just, I'd like that." So Luca stayed. He sat at Clara's tiny kitchen table while she made pasta with jarred sauce, because that's what her budget allowed. And he didn't comment on the chipped plates or the mismatched cups or the fact that her kitchen was roughly the size of his car. He just helped Emma set the table and complimented Clara's cooking like she'd made something that came from Angelina's instead of her $5 grocery haul. After dinner, Emma insisted Luca read her bedtime story. Clara stood in the doorway of her daughter's room and watched this dangerous man sit on a too-small bed surrounded by stuffed animals, reading about a brave little dinosaur with all the seriousness the story deserved. Emma was asleep before he finished, curled on her side with Rexy tucked under her chin. Luca stood carefully, turned off the lamp, and followed Clara back to the living room. The apartment felt different with him in it, smaller but warmer, like something Clara hadn't realized was missing had suddenly clicked into place. "She's out," Luca said. "She likes you. She doesn't fall asleep for just anyone during story time." "Good to know I have that effect." He moved closer, his hand settling on Clara's hips. "Today was perfect. It was just the park and ice cream and bad pasta." "It was perfect," he repeated, and kissed her until Clara forgot why she'd been arguing. They ended up on her couch, tangled together like teenagers, kissing until Clara's lips felt swollen and Luca's breathing was ragged. His hand had worked its way under her sweater, warm against her ribs, when his phone buzzed. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. "Ignore it," Clara murmured against his mouth. The phone rang. Luca pulled back with a muttered curse. "I'm sorry, I have to—" "It's okay," he answered with a clipped "what?" that made Clara sit up straighter. She watched his expression change, go hard and cold in a way she'd never seen. When? A pause. How many? Another pause, longer. I'm on my way. He hung up, and when he looked at Clara, she saw something in his eyes that made her stomach drop. I have to go. What's wrong? Nothing you need to worry about. But his jaw was tight, and his hands were already reaching for his jacket. I'm sorry, it's business. I have to handle it. Clara stood, wrapping her arms around herself. Is it dangerous? Clara, don't lie to me. Is it dangerous? Luca's silence was answer enough. He crossed to her, framed her face with his hands. I'll be fine. This is what I do. That doesn't make me less worried. I know. He kissed her forehead, then her mouth, quick and fierce. Lock the door behind me. Don't answer for anyone you don't know. I'll text you when I can. Luca, but he was already gone, the door closing behind him with careful quietness so he wouldn't wake Emma. Clara locked it, pressed her forehead against the wood, and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. His text came 2 hours later. Safe. Can't talk now. Sleep well. Clara didn't sleep well. She lay awake staring at her ceiling, listening to Emma's soft breathing from the next room, and tried not to imagine what business required Luca to leave that quickly, that tensely. Tried not to think about Detective Reeves's warnings or the cold way Marcus Reed had looked at her at the wedding. Monday crawled by. Luca texted sporadically, short messages that told Clara nothing except that he was alive. Tuesday was worse. By Wednesday, Clara was checking her phone every 5 minutes and jumping at every notification. Thursday morning, he called. I'm sorry, he said, no preamble. I should have called sooner. Are you okay? I'm fine. Had to handle some things. His voice was rough, tired. Can I see you? I know it's your day off, but where are you? About 2 blocks from your apartment. Clara looked at the clock. 6:30 a.m. Come up. He was at her door in 3 minutes, and when Clara opened it, her breath caught. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his jaw shadowed with stubble, his clothes wrinkled like he'd slept in them. But it was the look in his eyes that stopped her. Haunted. Raw. What happened? Clara asked. Luca stepped inside, closed the door, and pulled her into his arms. He just held her, his face buried in her hair, his breathing unsteady. Luca, you're scaring me. Marcus made a move. His voice was muffled against her shoulder. Tried to hit one of my warehouses. We shut it down, but it was close. Too close. Clara pulled back enough to see his face. Are you hurt? No, but 3 of my guys are in the hospital. His hand came up, traced her cheekbone like he was memorizing it. I couldn't stop thinking about you. About what could happen if Marcus decides to use you to get to me. I can take care of myself. I know you can, but I need... He stopped, shook his head. I need to know you're protected. You and Emma. What does that mean? It means I'm assigning someone to watch your building. Discreetly. You won't even know they're there. Clara's stomach twisted. You want to put guards on me? I want to make sure you're safe. Luca, that's... Emma will notice. People will talk. I can't have armed guards following me around. They won't be obvious, I promise. He cupped her face in both hands. Please, Clara, let me do this. I can't focus on handling Marcus if I'm terrified something's going to happen to you. She should say no. Should tell him this was too much, too fast, too invasive. But the fear in his eyes was real, and Clara knew what it felt like to be terrified for someone you cared about. Okay, she said quietly. But if Emma gets scared or asks questions, then we'll figure it out together. He kissed her, soft and grateful. Thank you. You need to sleep. I need to get back. Luca, you look like you're about to fall over. When's the last time you slept? Monday. Jesus. Clara took his hand, pulled him toward her bedroom. You're sleeping for at least a few hours. I don't have to be anywhere and Emma's still asleep. I can't just... You can and you will. She pushed him gently toward her bed. Shoes off. Lie down. Luca looked at her for a long moment, then did as he was told. He stretched out on her bed, too big for it, his feet hanging off the end, and Clara curled up beside him, her head on his chest. She felt him relax incrementally. his arm coming around her, his breathing starting to even out. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "For what?" "For dragging you into this. For making your life complicated." "Maybe I like complicated." Clara pressed a kiss to his chest, right over his heart. "Sleep, Luca." He did, and Clara lay there listening to his heartbeat and trying not to think too hard about what it meant that she felt safer with a crime boss asleep in her bed than she had in years of being alone. She must have dozed off because when she woke up, sunlight was streaming through her window and Emma's voice was drifting from the living room. Clara sat up with a start, remembered Luca, and turned to find the other side of her bed empty. In the living room, she found Luca and Emma at the kitchen table. He'd made pancakes, actual golden brown perfect pancakes, not Clara's usual burned attempts, and Emma was telling him about a dream she'd had involving flying dinosaurs and ice cream mountains. "You cook," Clara said. Luca looked up, a spatula in hand. "Basic survival skill. Coffee's ready." Clara poured herself a cup and tried to process the image in front of her. A dangerous man who'd spent 3 days dealing with gang warfare, now making breakfast for her daughter like it was the most normal thing in the world. "These are really good," Emma said through a mouthful of pancake. "Better than Mama's." "Traitor," Clara said, but she was smiling. After breakfast, Luca helped Emma brush her teeth and get ready for preschool, while Clara got dressed for what was supposed to be her day off. At the door, saying goodbye, Emma hugged Luca's legs and made him promise to come back soon. "I promise," Luca said, and Clara heard the weight of that promise in his voice. After Clara dropped Emma at school, she came back to find Luca still in her apartment, sitting at her kitchen table with his phone and a cup of coffee. "You didn't have to stay," Clara said. "I wanted to. I need to talk to you about something." Clara's stomach dropped. "That sounds ominous." "It's not. I hope it's not." Luca set down his phone. "Marcus is escalating. What happened Monday was just the opening move. He's going to keep pushing until something breaks." "What does that mean for us?" "It means I need to handle this before it gets worse, and it means you need to be more careful." He stood, crossed to her. "I know this isn't what you signed up for. You wanted a normal relationship, and I'm giving you security details and danger instead." "I knew what I was getting into." "Did you?" "Because I'm not sure I even knew how bad it would get." His hand settled on her shoulders. "If you want out, I'll understand. I'll make sure you're protected regardless. But if this is too much..." Clara kissed him, cutting off whatever he was about to say. When she pulled back, his eyes were dark and surprised. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. "You don't get to make that choice for me." "Clara, I mean it. You promised not to run unless I told you to. Well, same goes for you. You don't get to push me away because things got complicated." Something in Luca's expression cracked. He pulled her against him, his arms tight around her, and Clara felt him shaking slightly. "I don't know what I did to deserve you," he said into her hair. "You saw me. When everyone else looked through me, you saw me." Clara pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "So yeah, this is scary and complicated and probably insane, but I'm still here." Luca kissed her like she was air and he'd been drowning, and Clara kissed him back and tried not to think about how thoroughly she'd fallen for someone whose world was violence wrapped in expensive suits. They spent the day together, Luca handling business from his phone while Clara did laundry and cleaned her apartment and pretended everything was normal. He left before she had to pick up Emma, kissing her at the door with a promise to call later. The call came at midnight. Clara answered groggily, heart already racing. "Don't panic," Luca said, which immediately made her panic. "But Marcus knows where you live." Clara sat up, suddenly wide awake. "How?" "Does it matter? He knows. He sent a message through one of my guys, said to tell me he's seen you, seen Emma." Ice flooded Clara's veins. "He threatened my daughter?" "He threatened what matters to me, which includes both of you." Luca's voice was tight with controlled rage. "I need you to pack a bag. Enough for a few days. You and Emma are staying somewhere safe until I handle this." "Luca, please, Clara, don't fight me on this. I can't." His voice cracked slightly. "I can't let him hurt you, either of you." Clara looked at Emma's closed bedroom door, thought about someone watching them, knowing where they lived, what they looked like, using her baby as a threat. "Okay," she said. "Where?" "I'm sending someone to pick you up in 20 minutes. They'll take you to a house I own in Oak Park. It's secure, it's comfortable, and no one outside my inner circle knows about it. I have work tomorrow. Call in. Tell them it's a family emergency. Luca, I can't just... Yes, you can. I'll make sure you don't lose pay. Just please, do this for me. Clara closed her eyes, felt her careful normal life slipping further out of reach with every word. Okay, 20 minutes. She packed quickly, clothes for her and Emma, toiletries, Emma's favorite stuffed animals. Woke her daughter as gently as she could. Mama, what's wrong? Emma's voice was sleepy and confused. Nothing, baby. We're going on an adventure. A surprise sleepover at a new place. Right now? Right now. Come on, let's get you dressed. The man who arrived was named Tony, built like a wall with kind eyes. He helped carry their bags and didn't ask questions Clara wouldn't have known how to answer. The drive to Oak Park took 30 minutes, Emma dozing in the back seat while Clara stared out the window and tried to figure out when her life had turned into something requiring safe houses and armed escorts. The house was beautiful, a renovated Victorian with a security system that probably cost more than Clara's car. Tony showed them to a bedroom upstairs, mentioned that the fridge was stocked, that someone would be watching the perimeter, that Luca would be there in the morning. After Tony left, Clara put Emma back to bed in a room that wasn't theirs, in a house that wasn't home, and tried not to cry. This was her life now. This was what loving Luca Moretti meant. Her phone buzzed. Luca. You there safe? Clara. Yes. Luca. I'm sorry. Clara. No. Luca. I'm going to fix this, I promise. Clara stared at that promise and wondered what fixing it would cost. Wondered if she was strong enough to stay. Wondered if she was brave enough to keep choosing him when everything rational screamed to run. But when she closed her eyes, she saw Luca reading to Emma, making pancakes, looking at Clara like she was something precious. She remembered the way he'd held her when he was afraid, the way he'd promised to protect them, the way he'd made her feel seen for the first time in her life. So she texted back, I trust you, and meant it, even though trust had never felt so much like jumping off a cliff with no guarantee of landing. Morning came too early, sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains while Emma climbed onto Clara's bed asking why they were in a castle. Clara pulled her daughter close and tried to explain adventure in a way that didn't include words like threat or danger or the fact that a crime boss knew what preschool she attended. When can we go home? Emma asked, tracing patterns on Clara's arm. Soon, baby. We're just staying here for a little while. Is Luca coming? I think so. Good. Emma settled against her. I like him. He makes you smile more. Clara's throat went tight. Yeah? You think so? Uh-huh. You're not as sad when he's around. Out of the mouths of children. Clara kissed Emma's head and wondered when her 4-year-old had become perceptive enough to notice that her mother had been sad for years. Luca arrived at 8, looking like he'd slept about as well as Clara had. Tony let him in, and Clara heard their low voices from the kitchen before Luca appeared in the doorway of the bedroom. Hey, he said quietly. Hey yourself. Clara extracted herself from Emma, who'd fallen back asleep. She closed the bedroom door behind her. You look terrible. Feel worse. He pulled her into his arms, just held her for a long moment. I'm sorry for all of this. Stop apologizing and tell me what's happening. They went downstairs. Luca made coffee while Clara sat at the kitchen island and tried to process the fact that she was in a safe house because someone had threatened her child. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. Marcus wants a meeting. Neutral territory, both sides limited security. He says he wants to negotiate. You don't believe him. I think he wants to see if he can rattle me. Show that he can get to what matters. Luca's jaw tightened. And it worked. You and Emma here proves that. So what are you going to do? Take the meeting, see what he wants. He met her eyes. And make it very clear that you're off limits. Clara's stomach twisted. When? Tonight, downtown, at a restaurant Marcus owns, public enough that neither of us can pull anything obvious. That's what you think. What do you know? Luca was quiet for a moment. I know Marcus doesn't do anything without a reason. I know he's been pushing boundaries for months, testing to see where my lines are. And I know he saw you at that wedding and saw an opportunity. So this is my fault. No. Luca crossed to her, tilted her chin up so she had to meet his eyes. This is Marcus being a manipulative bastard, and me caring about you enough that it shows. None of this is your fault, Clara. Feels like it is. Well, it's not. He kissed her forehead. I need you to stay here today. Tony's going to be outside. There's another guy, Marco, who'll be here in an hour to trade off. You need anything? You call me. You get scared? You call me. You just want to hear my voice? You call me. You're going to get sick of me calling. Not possible. He kissed her properly then, deep and lingering, like he was trying to memorize the taste of her. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark. I'm going to fix this, Clara, I promise. Just come back safe, that's all I care about. He left, and Clara spent the day trying to keep Emma entertained in a strange house while anxiety ate at her insides. They played dinosaurs and watched movies and made lunch from the absurdly well-stocked fridge. Emma didn't seem to notice anything wrong, but Clara couldn't stop checking her phone, watching the clock, imagining every terrible outcome of Luca's meeting with Marcus. At 3, her phone rang. Unknown number. Clara almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Clara Bennett? The voice was male, smooth, faintly amused. Clara's whole body went cold. Who is this? Marcus Reed. We met briefly at the wedding. I wanted to introduce myself properly. Clara's hand tightened on the phone. How did you get this number? I get a lot of things I want, Clara. Your number was easy. A pause. I understand you and your daughter are staying at one of Luca's properties. Oak Park, correct? Beautiful neighborhood. Very safe. The threat was implicit and terrifying. Clara glanced toward the living room where Emma was playing, then walked quickly to the kitchen, lowering her voice. What do you want? To talk, woman to woman, so to speak. I'm not interested in talking to you. No? Pity. I thought you might like to know what kind of man you're getting involved with. Marcus's voice was conversational, like they were discussing the weather. Luca Moretti is a killer, Clara. Did he tell you that? Did he tell you about the people who've disappeared because they got in his way? I'm hanging up. He's using you. You understand that, don't you? A sweet single mother struggling to make ends meet. You're the perfect cover. Makes him look human, redeemable even. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Ask yourself why a man like Luca would be interested in someone like you. What do you have that he couldn't get from a dozen other women? Nothing, except that you make him look good. Marcus laughed softly. You're a prop, darling, a narrative device. And when he's done with the story, he'll discard you just like everything else that served its purpose. Clara's hand was shaking. If you're done, one more thing. Tonight's meeting? It's not going to go the way Luca thinks. He's walking into something he's not prepared for, and people he cares about are going to get hurt. Unless, of course, you do the smart thing. Which is? Leave him. Take your daughter and disappear. I'll even help you. New identity, relocation expenses, enough money to start over somewhere safe. His voice went softer, almost kind. I'm not a monster, Clara. I don't make war on children. But if you stay with Luca, you're putting your daughter in the crossfire. Is that really what you want? Clara's mind raced. This was manipulation, she knew that. Marcus was trying to get in her head, make her doubt, drive a wedge between her and Luca. But underneath the rational understanding was a whisper of fear asking, what if he's right? I'm not leaving him, Clara said, her voice steadier than she felt. No? How disappointing. Marcus sighed. Well, I tried. When things go badly tonight, and they will, remember I gave you a way out. Remember that what happens next is your choice as much as his. He hung up. Clara stood in the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear on a deadline, and tried to stop shaking. She should call Luca immediately, should tell him Marcus had contacted her, threatened her, offered her a deal. But what would that accomplish except making him more worried, more distracted before a meeting that was already dangerous? Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. A photo of Emma's preschool. Another photo of Clara's apartment building. A third of the hospital where she worked. The message below them read, just so you know I'm serious. Clara felt bile rise in her throat. She deleted the messages with shaking hands and sat down at the kitchen table, her head in her hands. This was real. This was her life now. A man she'd never met was threatening her child, and the only person who could protect them was walking into what might be a trap. Emma wandered in, Rexy under her arm.
"Mama, you okay?" Clara forced a smile. "I'm fine, baby. Just tired." "You want to play dinosaurs?" "Yeah, let's play dinosaurs." They played until Emma got hungry, until Clara made dinner she couldn't taste, until her daughter's bedtime came and Clara read stories in a voice that didn't shake. When Emma finally fell asleep, Clara collapsed on the couch and waited for Luca to call and tell her he was alive. The call came at 9. "It's done," Luca said without preamble. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Meeting went about as expected." Clara closed her eyes. "He called me today. Marcus." The silence on the other end was deafening. When Luca spoke again, his voice was dangerously quiet. "What did he say?" "That I should leave you, that you're using me, that tonight was going to go badly and it would be my fault for staying." Clara's voice broke slightly. "He sent pictures, Luca, of Emma's school, my apartment, the hospital." Jesus Christ. She heard him moving, heard a door close. "Why didn't you call me?" "Because you were about to walk into a meeting with him and I didn't want you distracted." Clara sits. "Did it go badly, the meeting?" Luca exhaled roughly. "It went. Marcus wants me to back off some territory in exchange for leaving you alone. He knows that's my pressure point now." "So what did you say?" "I told him to go to hell." A pause. "And then I told him if he ever contacted you again, if he ever sent you photos or made threats or so much as looked at Emma, I would burn his entire operation to the ground and make him watch." Despite everything, Clara felt a flicker of warmth in her chest. "How did he take that?" "About as well as you'd expect. We're past negotiation now. This is going to get uglier before it gets better." "So what do we do?" "You stay at the safe house. I handle Marcus. And then..." He stopped. "And then what?" "And then we figure out if you still want any part of this mess." Clara's throat tightened. "Luca, I mean it, Clara. You didn't sign up for death threats and safe houses and having to explain to your daughter why you can't go home. I wouldn't blame you for walking away." "Is that what you want? For me to walk away?" "I want you safe. Everything else is secondary." "That's not what I asked." She heard him breathe, heard the careful control in his voice when he finally spoke. "I want you here, with me, building something real. But not if it costs you your peace or your safety or your daughter's childhood. I can't live with that." "Then let me decide what I can live with." Clara sat up straighter. "I'm not leaving you, Luca. Marcus already gave me that option, and I said no. You shouldn't have to make that choice. But I did, and I chose you." Her voice softened. "So stop trying to give me permission to run. I'm staying." The sound Luca made was somewhere between a laugh and something broken. "You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the most reckless." "Maybe both." "Yeah, maybe both." A pause. "I'm coming there. To the safe house. I need to see you." "When?" 20 minutes. He made it in 15 and Clara heard the security system beep, heard his low voice conferring with Tony, and then he was there, striding through the door like he was being chased. He pulled Clara into his arms and kissed her like he'd been drowning, and she was air. "I'm sorry," he said against her mouth. "I'm so sorry." "Stop apologizing." "I can't. This is my fault. All of it." Clara pulled back enough to see his face. "Did you make Marcus threaten me?" "No, but did you force me to stay with you?" "No." "Then stop taking responsibility for other people's choices." She cupped his face in her hands. "Marcus did this. Not you. And I chose to stay. Also not you." Luca's eyes were dark with something that looked like pain. "You could die because of me, Clara. Emma could get hurt. How am I supposed to live with that?" "The same way I live with it. By trusting that you'll do everything you can to keep us safe." Clara kissed him softly. "I meant what I said. I'm not running." He held her for a long time, his face buried in her hair, his breathing unsteady. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "I need to tell you something about tonight." Clara's stomach dropped. "Okay." "Marcus brought someone to the meeting, a woman. She was..." He stopped, seemed to gather himself. She was wearing a wire. FBI. What?
Marcus is working with the feds, or they're working with him. Either way, they're building a case, and tonight was their way of getting me on record making threats. Clara's mind raced. So what does that mean? It means this isn't just about territory anymore. Marcus is trying to take me down completely, and he's got federal backing. Luca's jaw tightened. Which means anything I do to protect you, anything I do to handle him, could end up being the thing that puts me in prison. There has to be another way. If there is, I haven't found it yet. He cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. But I need you to understand what you're signing up for. This isn't just dangerous anymore, it's potentially catastrophic. So we run. You, me, Emma, we leave Chicago, start over somewhere else. I can't run. Too many people depend on me, and they'd find me anyway. He kissed her forehead. I'm not telling you this to scare you. I'm telling you because you deserve to know the truth before you decide if I'm worth it. Clara looked at him. This man who'd seen her when she was invisible, who read bedtime stories to her daughter, who was trying to protect her even as his world fell apart. She thought about Marcus's offer, about safety and anonymity, and a life without this constant fear. Then she thought about going back to being alone, about Emma never hearing Luca's laugh again, about never feeling the way she felt when he looked at her like she was the only thing that mattered. You're worth it, she said. Clara, I mean it. Whatever happens, whatever comes next, you're worth it. Luca kissed her like she'd given him something he didn't deserve, and Clara kissed him back and tried not to think about how thoroughly she'd tied her fate to his. They ended up on the couch, tangled together, kissing until they were both breathless. Luca's hand had worked its way under her shirt when a small voice from the stairs made them both freeze. Luca? Emma stood on the bottom step in her dinosaur pajamas, Rexy dragging behind her. Luca pulled back from Clara with a guilty expression that would have been funny if Clara's heart wasn't still racing. Hey, Em, what are you doing awake? I heard voices. Are you staying over? Luca glanced at Clara, who nodded. Yeah, I'm staying over. Good. Emma padded over, climbed onto the couch between them like it was the most natural thing in the world. Can we have pancakes tomorrow? If your mom says it's okay. It's okay, Clara said, her voice thick. She watched her daughter curl up against Luca, watched him automatically adjust to make room for her, and felt something crack open in her chest. This was what she'd been afraid to want, this feeling of family, of belonging, of not being alone anymore. Story? Emma asked, already half asleep. What story do you want? The dinosaur one. Luca looked at Clara over Emma's head, his expression soft and vulnerable. Clara nodded, and he started telling a story about a brave little triceratops who went on adventures. Emma was asleep before he finished, her breathing soft and even. Luca kept talking anyway, his voice low and soothing, and Clara thought that if she died tomorrow, at least she'd had this moment. When he finally stopped, the house was quiet except for Emma's breathing. Clara carefully extracted herself from the couch. I'll put her back to bed, she whispered. I've got her. Luca carried Emma upstairs like she weighed nothing, tucked her into bed with Rexy, and stood there for a moment just watching her sleep. Clara came up behind him, wrapped her arms around his waist. You're good at this, she said quietly. At what? Being here. With us. You make it look easy. It's the easiest thing I've ever done. He turned in her arms, pulled her close. Everything else in my life is complicated. This, you and Emma, this is the only thing that makes sense. They went to bed in the master bedroom, Luca holding Clara like she might disappear if he let go. She fell asleep to the sound of his heartbeat and woke up at 3 to find him gone. Panic spiked through her until she found him downstairs, standing at the window with his phone, his voice low and tense. I don't care what it takes. Find out who the agent is and get me everything on them. A pause. No, nothing illegal, just information. Another pause. Because I need to know who I'm dealing with before they try to use Clara as leverage. Yeah. Call me when you have something. He hung up, turned, and found Clara watching from the doorway. Couldn't sleep? She asked. Too much on my mind. He crossed to her, ran his hands down her arms. Go back to bed. You need rest. So do you. I'll rest when this is over. Clara took his hand, led him back upstairs, and pulled him into bed despite his protests. She curled against him, her head on his chest, and felt him eventually relax enough to sleep. But she stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, and wondered how long they could keep doing this before something broke. The answer came 2 days later. Clara was making lunch when Tony came in, his phone pressed to his ear, his face grim. He talked for 30 seconds, hung up, and looked at Clara. "We need to move you. Now." "What? Why?" "Marcus knows about this location. Luca's orders are to get you somewhere else immediately." Clara's blood went cold. "How does he know?" "Does it matter? Pack what you need. We're leaving in 5 minutes." Clara grabbed Emma, threw things in bags with shaking hands, and tried to explain to her confused daughter why they were leaving the castle for another adventure. Tony hustled them into a different car, a dark SUV with tinted windows, and pulled out of the driveway like he was being chased. "Where are we going?" Clara asked. "Luca's apartment. Downtown. It's more secure." They drove through Chicago while Emma asked questions Clara couldn't answer, and Tony made call after call coordinating God knew what. When they finally pulled into an underground parking garage, Clara's nerves were shot, and Emma was on the verge of tears. Luca met them at the elevator, his face tight with controlled rage. He pulled Clara into his arms, checked Emma over like he expected to find injuries, and only relaxed slightly when he confirmed they were both fine. "What happened?" Clara asked. "Marcus sent me a message. A photo of the safe house with a note saying he hopes we like the accommodations." Luca's jaw was tight enough to crack teeth. "He's escalating, trying to prove he can find you anywhere." "So what do we do?" "You stay here. This building has security Marcus can't breach without starting a war he's not ready for." He looked at Emma, then back at Clara. "And I end this. Tonight." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm meeting with people who can make Marcus's federal protection disappear. It means I'm calling in favors, and it means Marcus is going to learn what happens when you threaten my family." The word family hit Clara like a physical blow. Before she could process it, Luca was crouching down to Emma's level.
"Hey, Em, you okay?" "I don't like all the moving," Emma said, her voice small. "I know. I'm sorry. But you're safe here, I promise. And tomorrow we're going to make this all better, okay?" "Okay." Emma hugged him, and Clara watched Luca close his eyes like the weight of that hug was almost too much to bear. He showed them the apartment, sleek and modern, nothing like the safe house, and got Emma settled with the movie while Clara tried to process everything. When he finally had a moment alone with her in the kitchen while Emma was distracted, he pulled Clara against him and just held on. "I'm going to fix this," he said into her hair. "You keep saying that." "Because I mean it. Marcus pushed too far. He threatened you. He threatened Emma, and now he's going to pay for it." Clara pulled back to look at him. "What are you going to do?" "Whatever it takes." His eyes were hard. "I know that scares you. I know you don't want to know the details. But I need you to trust that when this is over, you and Emma will be safe. Can you do that?" Clara thought about Marcus's voice on the phone, about the photos of Emma's school, about the last 2 days of running and hiding and living in fear. She thought about the fact that her daughter deserved better than this, that she deserved better than this. But she also thought about Luca reading bedtime stories and making pancakes and looking at her like she was worth protecting. "I trust you," she said. Luca kissed her, hard and desperate, then pulled away. "I have to go. Meeting's in an hour. Tony's staying here with you. Don't open the door for anyone else. Don't leave. Just stay safe, please." "You too." He kissed Emma goodbye, made her promise to be good for her mom, and left. Clara watched the door close behind him and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. The hours crawled by. Emma eventually fell asleep on the couch. Tony stood by the door, silent and watchful. Clara paced, checked her phone, and tried to breathe through the anxiety eating at her insides. At 11, her phone rang. "Luca." "It's done," he said. "What's done?" "Marcus's federal protection is gone. The agent who was helping him has been reassigned. His case is falling apart." Luca's voice was tight with satisfaction. "He's exposed now, vulnerable, and he knows it." "So what happens now?" "Now he has 2 choices. Leave Chicago or deal with me without the FBI watching his back." A pause. "Either way, you're safe. Both of you." Clara's legs went weak. "It's really over?" "The worst of it, yeah. There'll be cleanup, but the immediate threat is gone. His voice softened. I'm coming home. To you. Home. Like this apartment was already theirs. Like they were already family. Hurry, Clara said. He did, and when he walked through the door 20 minutes later, Clara threw herself into his arms and kissed him like he'd been gone for weeks instead of hours. Emma woke up long enough to demand a hug, then went back to sleep. Tony excused himself to the guest room, and Clara and Luca stood in the middle of his apartment, holding each other, and breathed. It's really over, Clara asked again. The running part, yeah. You can go home tomorrow if you want. Back to your apartment, back to normal. Clara pulled back to look at him. What if I don't want normal? What do you want? This. You. Us. She touched his face. I don't want to go back to my apartment and pretend the last week didn't happen. I don't want to be apart from you anymore. Luca's eyes darkened. Clara, I know it's fast, I know it's crazy, but Emma and I have been running for 2 days, and the only time I felt safe was when you were there. So maybe we don't go back. Maybe we stay here. With you. You want to move in with me? Yeah, I do. Clara's heart was racing. Unless you don't want... He kissed her, cutting off whatever doubt she was about to express. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright. I want that more than anything, he said. But are you sure? Because once you're here, once we're doing this for real, there's no going back to casual. I don't want casual, I want you, all of you, including the complicated parts. Luca laughed, the sound rough and genuine. You're incredible. You know that? I'm terrified, but I'm doing it anyway. That's what makes you incredible. He kissed her again, softer this time. Okay. Move in, bring your terrible furniture and Emma's dinosaurs, and make this place feel like home. Clara smiled against his mouth. You're going to regret this when there are toys everywhere. Never. His arms tightened around her. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. They stood there, holding each other while Emma slept, and the city breathed outside the windows. Clara thought about how far she'd come from that wedding where she'd felt invisible and small, thought about the choice she'd made to say yes to one dance, to one dinner, to the terrifying possibility of being seen. She'd been so afraid of making another mistake, of choosing wrong again. But standing here in Luca's arms, feeling safe for the first time in years, Clara thought maybe the biggest mistake would have been playing it safe forever. I love you, she said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Luca went very still. What? I love you. I know it's too soon and I'm probably supposed to wait longer, but I love you, and I needed you to know. He cupped her face in his hands, his eyes intense. I love you too. Have since that wedding, when you looked at me like maybe I wasn't the worst thing I'd ever done. Clara's eyes burned. We're really doing this. Yeah, we're really doing this. He kissed her forehead, then her mouth. You, me, Emma, and whatever comes next. Together? Together. And for the first time since Ryan had walked out, since her family had made her feel like a disappointment, since she'd learned what it meant to be alone, Clara believed that maybe she'd finally found her way home. Moving into Luca's apartment should have felt surreal, but somehow it just felt right. Clara spent the next week shuttling boxes from her tiny apartment to his spacious downtown high-rise, Emma chattering excitedly about her new room with the big windows and how she could see the whole city from up high like a pterodactyl. Mama, can I paint my room purple? Emma asked on their third trip, dragging Rexy behind her. That's up to Luca, baby. It's his apartment. Our apartment, Luca corrected, appearing from the kitchen with coffee for Clara and juice for Emma. And yeah, you can paint it purple. Any color you want. Emma's squeal of delight echoed through the apartment, and Clara caught Luca's eye over her daughter's head. He smiled, that real smile that transformed his whole face, and Clara felt her chest go warm. But not everything was smooth. Clara's mother called on day 4, her voice tight with the particular disappointment Clara had grown up with. Vanessa tells me you've moved in with some man. Is that true? Clara switched the phone to her other ear, continuing to fold Emma's clothes. His name is Luca, and yes. Clara, you barely know him. What are you thinking? And Emma, what kind of example are you setting? I'm setting the example that people can be happy, that it's okay to take chances on something good. Good? You met him at the wedding a month ago. This is reckless, even for you. Even for you. Like Clara had a history of being reckless instead of a history of being so careful she'd nearly disappeared. I love him, Mom, and he loves me, and Emma is happy here. Love. Barbara made it sound like a disease. You thought you loved Ryan too, and look how that turned out. Clara closed her eyes, counted to 5. Luca is nothing like Ryan.
That's what you said about Ryan when you first met him, that he was nothing like the boys you dated before. Her mother sighed. I'm just worried about you, about my granddaughter. You're making decisions based on emotion instead of logic. Maybe that's not a bad thing. It is when you have a child to think about. Clara hung up before she said something she'd regret. Luca found her 10 minutes later sitting on their bed with her head in her hands. Your mom? He asked quietly. How did you know? You've got that look, same one you had at the wedding. He sat beside her, pulled her against his side. What'd she say? That I'm being reckless, that I barely know you, that I'm setting a bad example for Emma. Claire's voice went thick. That I'm making the same mistake I made with Ryan. Luca was quiet for a moment. Maybe she's not completely wrong. Clara pulled back to look at him. What? This is fast, Clara. We both know it. And I'm not exactly what any mother would want for her daughter. His jaw tightened. I'm a criminal. I've done things that would make your mother's concerns seem reasonable. Don't do that. Do what? Talk like you're not good enough, like you're some mistake I'm making. Clara cupped his face in her hands. You're the best thing that's happened to me in years. You see me. You love Emma. You make me feel like I matter. That's not a mistake. Your mother thinks it is. My mother thinks everything I do is a mistake. I stopped trying to please her years ago. Clara kissed him softly. I don't care what she thinks. I care what you think, what I think. And I think this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. Luca's arms came around her, tight and sure. I love you. You know that, right? Yeah, I know. They stayed like that until Emma came barreling in asking if they could order pizza for dinner, her presence breaking the tension and reminding Clara why she'd made this choice. This was family, messy and complicated and nothing like the neat little box her mother wanted her life to fit into. The real test came 2 weeks later when Marcus made his final play. Clara was at the hospital, midway through her shift, when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Clara Bennett. The voice was female, professional. This is Agent Sarah Chen with the FBI. We need to talk. Clara's blood went cold. About what? About Luca Moretti and your involvement with his organization. I'd like to meet with you. Today, if possible. I don't have anything to say to you. I think you do. We have evidence that places you at several locations connected to Moretti's criminal activities. We have phone records showing extensive contact between you two, and we have witnesses who can testify that you've been living with him. Agent Chen paused. You're not in trouble, Ms. Bennett, not yet, but we need your cooperation. Claire's hands were shaking. I want a lawyer. That's your right. But consider this. Marcus Reed is planning something that puts you and your daughter directly in the crosshair. If you help us, we can protect you. If you don't, you're on your own when this goes bad. I have protection. From Moretti? The same man whose organization we're about to dismantle. Agent Chen's voice went softer. I've read your file, Clara. Single mother, pediatric nurse, no criminal history. You're not like the people Moretti usually associates with. I don't want to see you go down with him when we move on this. When is that? Soon. Days, not weeks. So you need to decide. Are you willing to testify against him? Or are you going to let loyalty to a man you barely know destroy your life? Clara hung up, her heart racing. She made it through the rest of her shift on autopilot, her mind spinning. The FBI was coming for Luca. Marcus was planning something, and she was caught in the middle with a daughter to protect, and a man she loved, who might end up in prison. She didn't tell Luca about the call, not that night when they had dinner with Emma, not when they put her daughter to bed, not when they lay tangled together in the dark. She told herself she was protecting him, but really she was protecting herself from having to make an impossible choice. The choice got made for her 3 days later. Clara was picking Emma up from preschool when she noticed the car. Black sedan, tinted windows, parked across the street with the engine running. She grabbed Emma's hand tighter, walked faster toward Luca's building. The car followed. She made it to the lobby, her heart pounding, and called Luca. "Someone's following me." "Where are you?" "Downstairs in the lobby. They're outside." "Stay there. I'm coming down. Tony's with me." Luca appeared 3 minutes later with Tony and another man Clara didn't recognize. They ushered her and Emma into the elevator while Tony went outside to deal with whoever was in the car.
"Who was it?" Clara asked when they were safely in the apartment. "FBI. They've been watching the building for 2 days." Luca's jaw was tight. "They're building their case. There's something I need to tell you." Clara's voice shook. "Agent Chen called me 3 days ago. She wanted me to testify against you." Luca went very still. "What did you say?" I hung up on her. "Clara, I know I should have told you, but I couldn't." She stopped, tears burning her eyes.
"She said they're moving soon, that Marcus is planning something, that I need to decide if I'm with you or against you." "And what did you decide?" "I'm with you. Always." Clara grabbed his hands. "But Luca, if the FBI is really coming for you, if this is really happening, what are we going to do?" Luca pulled her close, his face in her hair. "I'm not going to let them use you to get to me, which means you need to stay as far from my business as possible from now on. We live together. How am I supposed to stay separate from your business?" "I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out." He pulled back to look at her. "I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Clara nodded, but fear was coiling in her gut. This was bigger than Marcus now. This was federal charges and prison time and everything falling apart. The explosion came that night. Clara was reading to Emma when she heard raised voices from the living room. Luca on the phone, his tone sharp and angry. She tucked Emma in and went to find him standing at the window, phone pressed to his ear. "I don't care what it takes. Find out who's feeding them information and shut it down." A pause. "No, nothing permanent. Just make it clear that talking to the FBI is bad for their health." He hung up, saw Clara, and his expression shifted. "Hey, what's happening?" "Someone in my organization is working with the feds, giving them evidence, testimony, access to financial records." He ran a hand through his hair. "If we don't plug the leak, this whole thing comes down in the next week." "What about Marcus?" "Marcus is the least of my problems right now. The FBI has enough to move without him." Luca's eyes were hard. "But they don't have enough to make anything stick if I can control the narrative, which means finding the rat and convincing them to recant." "That sounds like a threat." "It is. A carefully calculated one." He crossed to her, cupped her face. "I know this isn't what you signed up for. I know you're scared, but I promise you I'm going to handle this." Clara wanted to believe him, but she'd seen enough crime dramas to know how these things ended, and it was rarely with the criminal walking free. The next morning, Marcus made his move. Clara was at work when Luca called, his voice tight with controlled rage. "Marcus has Emma." The world stopped. Clara's vision went white at the edges, her breath stopping in her chest. "What?" "He grabbed her from preschool an hour ago. Left a note saying he wants to meet, just you and me." Luca's voice cracked slightly. "Clara, I'm so sorry. I had someone watching the school, but Marcus had more people, and they—" "Where?" Clara's voice was shaking so hard she could barely speak. "Where does he want to meet?" "Navy Pier in 2 hours. His message said no weapons, no backup, just us or he—" Luca stopped. "We'll get her back. I swear to God, Clara, we'll get her back." Clara hung up, told her supervisor there was an emergency, and was in a cab to Luca's building before she could think. She found him in the apartment, pacing like a caged animal, his phone in one hand. "I'm coming with you," Clara said. "No, you're staying here where it's safe." "He has my daughter, Luca. I'm coming." "Clara, don't." Her voice broke. "Don't tell me to stay behind. Don't tell me it's too dangerous. That's my baby he took. I'm going whether you like it or not." Luca looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, but you do exactly what I say. Understand?" "I understand." They drove to Navy Pier in tense silence, Clara's hands shaking so hard she had to sit on them. Luca made call after call, coordinating something, his voice clipped and professional even though Clara could see the fear in his eyes. "What's the plan?" Clara asked. "I give Marcus what he wants, me backing off his territory, public acknowledgement that he won this round. He gives us Emma unharmed. Luca's jaw tightened. And then, when you and Emma are safe, I burn his entire operation to the ground. The FBI... I don't care about the FBI right now. I care about getting Emma back. They parked and walked onto the pier, the Chicago wind cutting through Clara's jacket. Marcus was waiting near the end, Emma held by a man twice her size. Her daughter looked terrified but unharmed, tears streaming down her face. "Mama!" Emma cried out when she saw Clara. "I'm here, baby. It's going to be okay." Marcus smiled, cold and satisfied. "Luca, Clara, so glad you could make it." "Let her go," Luca said, his voice deadly quiet. "Now." "In a minute. First, we're going to have a conversation." Marcus gestured to the man holding Emma. "My friend here is going to take the little one for a walk while we talk, just to make sure everyone stays civil." "No." Clara's voice was stronger than she felt. "No, you let her go right now, or I start screaming for the police and we all go down together." Marcus laughed. "You think I'm afraid of the police? I have FBI protection, sweetheart. They're not going to touch me." "Not anymore, you don't." Luca's voice was sharp. "Your agent got reassigned. Your case fell apart. You're exposed, Marcus. The only thing keeping you alive right now is the fact that you have Emma." Something flickered in Marcus's eyes. Uncertainty, fear. Clara saw her opening and took it. "You want to know why Luca cares about me?" she said, her voice shaking but clear. "It's not because I'm useful or pretty or the perfect cover. It's because I see him as a person instead of a tool, because I chose him knowing exactly what he is, and because when you threatened my daughter, you made this personal." She stepped forward, ignoring Luca's warning hand on her arm. "You think holding Emma gives you power? It doesn't. It just proves you're desperate, that you've already lost and you're scrambling for any leverage you can find." Clara's voice went cold. "So, here's what's going to happen. You're going to let my daughter go, right now, and then you're going to walk away from Chicago and never come back. Because if you don't, I will make it my life's mission to destroy you." "You?" Marcus laughed. "You're a nurse. What are you going to do?" "I'm going to testify to the FBI, to whoever will listen. I'll tell them everything. How you threatened me, how you stalked my daughter, how you kidnapped a 4-year-old to use as leverage against Luca. And unlike your shaky protection deal, my testimony will stick because I have nothing to gain and everything to lose by lying." Marcus's smile faltered. "You're bluffing." "Am I? You want to test that?" Clara's voice was steady now, stronger. "Let Emma go and find out if I'm bluffing. Or keep her and watch me bring everything down on your head. Consequences be damned." The silence stretched, tense and terrible. Then Marcus nodded to the man holding Emma. "Let her go." Emma ran to Clara, who scooped her up and held on so tight her daughter squeaked. Luca stepped forward, putting himself between Clara and Marcus. "This isn't over," Marcus said. "Yes, it is." Luca's voice was flat. "You're leaving Chicago, tonight. If I see you again, if I hear you've contacted Clara or Emma, if you so much as think about coming back, I will end you, slowly. The FBI won't protect you from me. They can't protect you from me." Luca leaned in, his voice dropping. "You made a mistake, Marcus. You went after my family. That's not something I forgive." Marcus held his gaze for a long moment, then turned and walked away. His man followed. Clara watched them disappear into the crowd, her whole body shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. "Is he really gone?" she asked. "He's gone. And if he's smart, he'll stay gone." Luca turned to her and Emma, his expression cracking. "Are you okay? Both of you?" "I'm okay," Emma said, her voice small. "But I was scared, Luca." "I know, sweetheart. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." He pulled them both into his arms, his whole body shaking. "I should have had more people watching. I should have anticipated—" "Stop," Clara said. "You didn't do this. Marcus did. And it's over now." They stood there on Navy Pier, the three of them wrapped around each other, and Clara felt something shift. They'd survived the worst Marcus could throw at them. They'd survived together. The FBI came calling 3 days later. Agent Chen and 2 other agents showed up at Luca's apartment with a warrant and determined expressions. "Luca Moretti, you're under arrest for racketeering, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit fraud," Agent Chen said, her voice professional and cold. Clara watched them handcuff him, watched them read him his rights, and felt her world tilt. Emma was at school, thank God, but Clara was alone when they took him away. "Don't say anything," Luca told her as they led him to the door. "Call my lawyer. Take care of Emma. I'll be out in 48 hours.
How do you know? He smiled, tired but genuine. Because they don't have enough evidence to hold me longer than that without your testimony, and you're not going to testify against me. Agent Chen paused at the door. We'll be in touch, Ms. Bennett. You have a decision to make. They left. Clara collapsed on the couch and tried to figure out how her life had gotten here. 4 weeks ago, she'd been invisible at her sister's wedding. Now she was choosing between the man she loved and potential obstruction of justice charges. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered it anyway. "Clara?" Luca's voice, calling from God knew where. "I need you to listen carefully." "How are you calling me?" "Doesn't matter. Listen, my lawyer is going to contact you. His name is David Chen. You talk to him. No one else. Not the FBI, not Agent Chen, no one." Luca, trust me, please. His voice softened. "I know this is scary. I know you're worried, but this is going to be okay. The FBI doesn't have a case without your testimony, and even if they did, my lawyer is good enough to tear it apart. What if they charge me with something? They won't. You haven't done anything wrong." A pause. "I love you, Clara. Tell Emma I love her too, and I'll see you soon." He hung up. Clara sat there holding her phone and trying not to cry. The lawyer called 30 minutes later. David Chen was smooth and professional and told Clara exactly what she needed to say if the FBI came calling again. Nothing. She didn't have to testify. She didn't have to answer questions. She could invoke her Fifth Amendment rights and walk away. "What happens to Luca?" Clara asked. "Depends on what evidence they have, but without an insider witness, their case is mostly circumstantial. They'll hold him for 48 hours, try to pressure him into a plea deal, and when that doesn't work, they'll have to let him go or charge him." David's voice was confident. "My money's on them letting him go. This was a fishing expedition that didn't catch anything." He was right. Luca was released 48 hours later, no charges filed. Clara picked him up from the federal building with Emma in tow, and her daughter launched herself at him like she hadn't seen him in months instead of 2 days. "You're back," Emma said, wrapping her arms around his neck. "I'm back." Luca looked at Clara over Emma's head, his eyes tired but relieved. "Sorry about that. Don't apologize, just don't get arrested again." "I'll do my best." They went home because Luca's apartment was home now, despite everything, and tried to figure out what normal looked like after everything they'd been through. It took time. The FBI came back twice more, trying to pressure Clara into cooperating. She refused, citing her Fifth Amendment rights exactly like David had told her to, and eventually they stopped calling. Marcus disappeared, rumored to have fled to Miami. Luca's organization restructured, went more legitimate, started laundering less money and investing more in actual businesses. And Clara, Luca, and Emma became a family. It wasn't perfect. Emma had nightmares about being taken for weeks after Navy Pier. Clara's mother refused to speak to her for 2 months after finding out about Luca's arrest. The hospital gossip was brutal enough that Clara considered finding a new job, but they worked through it. Luca went to therapy at Clara's insistence, started dealing with the trauma of his childhood instead of burying it in work. Clara set boundaries with her family, told her mother that she could accept Luca or lose contact with her daughter. Emma started sleeping through the night again, especially when Luca was there to read her stories and check under the bed for monsters. 6 months after Navy Pier, Luca took Clara and Emma back to Vanessa's house for a family dinner. Clara's whole family was there, her parents, Vanessa and James, cousins, and aunts and uncles who'd barely acknowledged her existence at the wedding. "Why are we here?" Clara whispered to Luca as they walked up to the door. "Because I have something to say, and I want witnesses." Before Clara could ask what that meant, Vanessa opened the door. Her expression when she saw Luca was complicated: recognition, wariness, and something that might have been grudging respect. "Clara, Luca, Emma, come in." Dinner was awkward at first. Clara's mother made pointed comments about appropriate relationships and stability. Her father mostly ignored them. Vanessa asked polite questions that felt like landmines. Emma, oblivious to the tension, chatted about dinosaurs in her new purple bedroom. After dinner, Luca stood up. cleared his throat. Every eye in the room turned to him. "I know most of you don't approve of me," he said, his voice steady. "I know you think Clara made a mistake getting involved with someone like me, and maybe you're right to think that. I'm not the kind of man most mothers dream of for their daughters." Clara's mother made a small, satisfied noise. Luca ignored it. "But I love your daughter. I love her more than I thought I could love anyone. She sees me as more than what I do, more than my worst mistakes, and she's made me want to be better than I've ever been." He turned to Clara, pulled a small box from his pocket. "Clara Bennett, you're the bravest person I've ever met. You saved my life at a wedding when you thought you were just escaping embarrassment. You've saved it every day since by choosing to stay when everyone told you to run." Clara's hands flew to her mouth. Emma bounced in her chair, sensing something important was happening. "I know we've only known each other 6 months. I know this is fast, but I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life making you as happy as you've made me." Luca dropped to one knee, opened the box. "Will you marry me?" The ring was beautiful, a simple solitaire that caught the light and threw rainbows across the dining room, but Clara barely saw it. She was too busy looking at Luca's face, at the vulnerability and hope written there. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, of course, yes." The room erupted. Emma cheered. Vanessa looked shocked. Clara's mother looked like she'd swallowed something sour. But Clara didn't care about any of them. She just cared about Luca sliding the ring onto her finger and pulling her into his arms and kissing her like she was the only person in the world. "I love you," he whispered against her mouth. "I love you too." Emma wormed her way between them, demanding to see the ring. Luca lifted her up, and Clara wrapped her arms around both of them. And for the first time in her entire life, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Clara's mother left early, her disapproval hanging in the air like smoke. But Vanessa surprised everyone by raising her glass. "To Clara and Luca, may you be happy, even if I don't understand how you got here." It wasn't a warm endorsement, but it was something. Clara would take it. They got married 3 months later at the same hotel where they'd met. But this time Clara wasn't sitting at table 12 trying to disappear. She was walking down the aisle in a dress that actually fit, toward a man who looked at her like she'd hung the moon, while her daughter scattered flower petals and giggled the whole way. Angelina cried through the whole ceremony. Tony stood as Luca's best man. Clara's mother didn't attend, but Vanessa did, bringing James and a wrapped gift Clara didn't have the heart to open yet. When the officiant pronounced them married and Luca kissed her, Clara felt the last piece of her old life fall away. She wasn't the invisible one anymore. She wasn't the disappointment or the cautionary tale or the woman who'd made all the wrong choices. She was Clara Moretti, loved and seen and chosen. At the reception, Emma monopolized the dance floor while Clara and Luca watched from their table. "You okay?" Luca asked. "More than okay." Clara leaned against him. "Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me. At that wedding when I was trying so hard to disappear, for looking at me like I mattered." Luca turned her face toward his thumb brushing her cheekbone. "You've always mattered, Clara. You just needed someone to prove it to you." They danced later, the two of them swaying together while Emma spun in circles nearby. The hotel ballroom sparkled around them, but Clara only had eyes for her husband and daughter, her family. When Emma finally crashed from sugar and excitement, Luca carried her to the car while Clara said goodbye to the handful of guests who'd stayed late. Angelina hugged her so tight Clara's ribs hurt. "You take care of my boy," the older woman said. "I will, promise. And he'll take care of you. He's a good man, even if he forgets sometimes." Clara smiled. "I know." They drove home, to the apartment that was fully theirs now, filled with Emma's dinosaurs and Clara's books and Luca's suits, and put their daughter to bed together. Emma was asleep before they finished the story, Rexy tucked under her chin. In their bedroom, Luca pulled Clara close and kissed her like they had all the time in the world. "Mrs. Moretti," he murmured against her mouth. "Mr. Moretti." I like the sound of that." "Me too." They made love slowly, carefully, like they were learning each other all over again. Afterward, Clara lay with her head on Luca's chest and listened to his heartbeat and felt grateful for every choice that had led her here. "I never thought I'd have this," she said quietly. "Have what?" This, family, love, someone who sees me. Her voice went thick. I was so sure I'd messed everything up so badly that I didn't deserve a second chance. Luca's arms tightened around her. Everyone deserves a second chance, especially people who've spent their whole lives trying to be perfect for everyone else. I'm not trying to be perfect for you. I know. That's why I love you. They fell asleep tangled together, and when Clara woke the next morning to Emma climbing into bed between them demanding pancakes, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Complete. The months that followed were messy and imperfect, and exactly what Clara needed. Luca officially transitioned his organization into legitimate businesses, real estate development, restaurants, security consulting. It wasn't completely clean, but it was cleaner than it had been. The FBI stopped circling. Marcus stayed gone. Clara kept working at the hospital because she loved it, because it reminded her that she was more than just someone's wife. Emma started kindergarten and made friends and stopped having nightmares. They became a normal family, or as normal as any family could be when the father's past included things best left unexamined. A year after the wedding, Luca surprised Clara with papers establishing a foundation in Emma's name, the Clara and Emma Bennett Foundation, dedicated to helping single mothers afford childcare and health care. You did this? Clara asked, staring at the documents. You spent years struggling alone because the system failed you. I figured we could help make sure other people don't have to struggle the same way. Luca shrugged, but his eyes were soft. Consider it my attempt to balance the scales. Clara kissed him hard enough that they ended up on the couch, laughing and tangled together like teenagers. I love you, she said against his mouth. I know. You married me, remember? Best decision I ever made. Second best. First was saying yes to one dance at your sister's wedding. Clara smiled because he was right. That one yes had changed everything. Had taken her from invisible to seen, from broken to whole, from alone to surrounded by love. 2 years later, Clara found out she was pregnant. She told Luca on a random Tuesday, no fanfare, just the two of them in their kitchen while Emma was at school. You're sure? He asked, his voice careful. 3 tests, sure. Luca pulled her into his arms and held on like she might disappear. We're having a baby. We're having a baby, Clara confirmed, laughing through sudden tears. Emma's going to lose her mind. She's going to demand a dinosaur-themed nursery. Obviously. Luca pulled back to look at her, his eyes bright. Thank you. For what? For saying yes, to everything, to me. Clara kissed him and thought about that night at the wedding when she'd been so small and scared and convinced she didn't deserve anything good. She thought about Luca offering her an escape and turning it into something real. She thought about every choice that had led them here, to this moment, to this life they'd built together. Thank you for asking, she said. Their son was born 7 months later, screaming and perfect, and immediately beloved by his big sister who insisted on calling him Rex even though his name was Michael. Luca cried when he held him for the first time, and Clara took a picture that she'd treasure forever. They were a family, messy and imperfect, and built on a foundation of bad decisions that had somehow turned out right. Clara still got looks sometimes when people found out who her husband was. Her mother still didn't approve. The hospital still gossiped. But none of it mattered because Clara wasn't invisible anymore. She was seen, loved, chosen every single day by the man who'd noticed her trying to disappear and decided she was worth saving. And she'd saved him right back. On their 5th anniversary, Luca took Clara back to Navy Pier. Not to the spot where Marcus had taken Emma, they'd never go back there, but to a different section, quieter, with a view of the lake stretching out to the horizon. Why here? Clara asked. Because this is where you became the bravest person I'd ever met. Luca pulled her close, his arms around her waist. You stood up to Marcus with nothing but words and will. You protected Emma and me both, and you did it without hesitation. I was terrified. Being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing it anyway. He kissed her temple. You taught me that. They stood there watching the water, their 2 kids asleep in the car with Tony keeping watch, and Clara thought about how far they'd come. From a fake relationship at a wedding to a real family built on love and choice and the determination to be better than their worst moments. I'd do it all again, Clara said quietly. Yeah? Every second,
every scary decision, every moment of doubt. She turned in his arms to face him. Because it led me here. To you. To us. Luca's smile was soft and real, the one he saved just for her. I love you, Clara Moretti. I love you too. And standing there on Navy Pier with the Chicago skyline glittering behind them and their family waiting in the car, Clara finally understood what it felt like to be home. Not a place, but a person. Not perfect, but real. She'd spent so long trying to be invisible that she'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen. But Luca had reminded her, had looked at her across a ballroom full of people and decided she was worth noticing, worth knowing, worth loving. And Clara had done the same for him, seen past the criminal to the man who read bedtime stories and made pancakes and loved her daughter like she was his own. They'd saved each other. And in doing so, they'd built something neither of them had thought they deserved. A family, a future, a life where being seen wasn't something to fear, but something to celebrate. Clara had started that night at her sister's wedding, feeling small and broken and convinced she'd never be more than a disappointment. She'd ended up strong and whole and surrounded by people who loved her exactly as she was. And if that wasn't proof that one brave choice could change everything, Clara didn't know what was.